Beneath layers of ice, a giant world slept, colder than we can imagine, grander than any dream. Here, the Earth held its breath, a time when glaciers ruled and silence stretched for miles. Imagine a land so vast, so white, it swallowed the horizon. In this deep freeze, mighty beasts roamed. Woolly mammoths shook the ground. Saber-toothed cats hunted in the snow. The air hummed with ancient life, stories of endless winters, strange migrations across frozen lands, creatures that once walked the earth but are now gone. Scientists dig into the permafrost, finding frozen giants, clues to a lost time. What really happened? No one truly knows. Even now we look at our changing world wondering about the past. What else vanished, silent and unseen with the melting ice? Before we begin this prehistoric ice age journey, let us know where in the world you're watching from, and what time it is for you right now. Post it in the comments below and settle in for a fascinating story about the extinction of the Ice Age world. The term Ice Age refers to a long period of time when the Earth's climate was much colder than it is today. During an ice age, large parts of the planet are covered by vast sheets of ice, known as glaciers. These are not just small patches of ice, but enormous, thick layers that can stretch for hundreds or even thousands of miles across continents. The most recent ice age, often called the last glacial period, began about 110,000 years ago and ended roughly 12,000 years ago. However, it is important to understand that Ice Age can also refer to much longer spans of Earth's history, when ice was present at the poles, and even our current time is technically part of an ongoing ice age that started about 2.6 million years ago, characterized by cycles of colder glacial periods and warmer interglacial periods. The last glacial period is the one most people think of when they hear Ice Age, because it is the most recent and its effects are still visible on the landscape. During this most recent cold period, the global scale of ice coverage was immense. Ice sheets grew to cover much of North America, Europe, and parts of Asia. For instance, in North America, the Laurentide ice sheet covered almost all of Canada and extended deep into the United States, reaching as far south as Illinois and Missouri. In Europe, the Scandinavian ice sheet covered much of northern Europe, including Scandinavia, the British Isles, and parts of Germany and Poland. Smaller ice caps also formed in mountainous regions around the world, such as the Alps, the Himalayas, and the Andes. Even areas that were not directly covered by ice experienced significant changes, including much colder temperatures, altered rainfall patterns, and lower sea levels. A glacier is a large, persistent body of dense ice that is constantly moving under its own weight. It forms from the accumulation of snow over many years, where the snow compacts and recrystallizes into ice. As more snow falls and accumulates, the pressure causes the ice to deform and flow slowly, like a very thick, slow-moving river. Glaciers can be found in mountain valleys, where they are called valley glaciers, or as vast sheets covering large land masses, which are known as ice sheets or continental glaciers. An ice sheet is a massive glacier that covers an area of more than 50,000 square kilometers. These are the truly enormous bodies of ice that characterize an ice age. They are so large that their own weight causes them to spread outwards from a central dome. The two largest ice sheets on Earth today are the Antarctic ice sheet and the Greenland ice sheet. During the last glacial period, there were several more of these immense ice sheets. Their sheer size and weight allowed them to reshape the land beneath them, grinding down mountains, carving out valleys, and depositing vast amounts of rock and sediment as they moved. The presence of these ice sheets had a profound impact on global climate, sea levels, and the distribution of life on Earth. They reflected a large amount of the sun's energy back into space, contributing to the colder temperatures, and locked up enormous volumes of water, leading to a significant drop in global sea levels. The immense ice sheets of the last ice age were truly dominant features of the Earth's surface. These were not merely frozen patches, but colossal masses of ice, thousands of feet thick, that reshaped continents. The two most significant were the Laurentide ice sheet in North America and the Scandinavian ice sheet in Europe. Their sheer scale and power were responsible for many of the landforms we see today. The Laurentide ice sheet was centered over what is now eastern Canada, but it expanded dramatically, covering nearly all of Canada and extending far into the present-day United States. At its maximum extent, it reached south to the Ohio and Missouri rivers, covering states like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, and New York. Its thickness was staggering, estimated to be more than 2 miles deep in some areas, particularly over Hudson Bay. Imagine a mountain range made entirely of ice, slowly moving. The weight of this ice was so immense that it pressed down on the Earth's crust, causing the land to sink. Even today, thousands of years after the ice melted, some areas that were once beneath the Laurentide ice sheet are still slowly rising, a process known as isostatic rebound. This rebound is a testament to the incredible weight that once rested upon the land. As the ice sheet moved, it acted like giant sandpaper, scraping away soil and rock. It plucked boulders from bedrock, ground them into fine powder, and transported them hundreds of miles. This process created distinct landforms such as drumlins, which are elongated hills shaped by glacial flow, and eskers, which are long winding ridges formed by rivers flowing within or beneath the ice. The Great Lakes, for example, are a direct result of the Laurentide ice sheet's erosive power, carving out deep basins that later filled with meltwater. In Europe, the Scandinavian ice sheet was equally impressive. It originated in the mountains of Scandinavia and spread outwards, covering Norway, Sweden, Finland, and extending across the Baltic Sea into parts of Germany, Poland, and Russia. It also covered the entire British Isles, except for a few isolated mountain peaks. Like its North American counterpart, the Scandinavian ice sheet was thousands of feet thick in its central regions. Its movement created many of the fjords that are characteristic of the Norwegian coastline, which are deep, narrow inlets of the sea carved by glaciers. The ice also left behind vast plains of glacial till, a mixture of clay, sand, gravel, and boulders deposited directly by the ice. The fertile soils of many European agricultural regions are derived from these glacial deposits. The impact of these ice sheets was not limited to the areas they directly covered. Their presence significantly altered global weather patterns, diverting wind and ocean currents and creating vast periglacial zones, areas adjacent to the ice sheets that experienced intense freezing and thawing cycles. These zones were characterized by permafrost, permanently frozen ground, and unique landforms like pingos and patterned ground. The sheer volume of water locked up in these ice sheets also caused global sea levels to drop by as much as 400 feet, exposing vast areas of continental shelf and creating land bridges that connected continents, such as the Bering Land Bridge between Asia and North America. These worlds of ice were dynamic landscapes, constantly changing as the ice advanced and retreated, leaving an indelible mark on the Earth's surface and influencing the course of life. During the Ice Age, the general weather conditions across the globe were significantly different from what we experience today. The most defining characteristic was the much colder average temperature. Globally, temperatures were estimated to be about 8 to 10 degrees Celsius lower than present-day averages. This seemingly small difference had profound effects on the planet's climate systems. The cold was not uniform. It was more intense at higher latitudes, near the poles and the massive ice sheets, but even tropical regions experienced cooler temperatures. The cold periods were punctuated by short, slightly warmer intervals, but the overall trend was one of sustained chill. Beyond just temperature, the Ice Age climate was also marked by drier conditions in many regions. With so much of the Earth's water locked up in massive ice sheets, less moisture was available in the atmosphere for precipitation. This led to expanded deserts and semi-arid regions in some parts of the world that are now more humid. For instance, large areas of what are now fertile plains in North America and Eurasia were much drier, supporting different types of vegetation, or even becoming barren. The formation of large, cold, high-pressure systems over the ice sheets also pushed storm tracks towards the equator, meaning that areas that typically receive a lot of rainfall today might have been much drier during glacial periods. Conversely, some regions that are now dry might have received more moisture as storm tracks shifted. For example, parts of the southwestern United States experienced more rainfall, leading to the formation of large pluvial lakes. Another prominent feature of the Ice Age climate was the presence of strong, constant winds. These winds were driven by the vast temperature differences between the cold, ice-covered continents and the relatively warmer oceans. The large, stable, high-pressure systems over the ice sheets created a strong pressure gradient, leading to persistent and powerful winds that swept across the land. These winds played a crucial role in shaping the landscape. They picked up fine sediment, known as loess, from the barren glaciated areas and deposited it over vast distances. These loess deposits, which can be hundreds of feet thick in places like China and the central United States, are incredibly fertile and form the basis of some of the world's most productive agricultural lands today. The winds also contributed to the harshness of the environment, creating severe wind chill and driving blizzards. In areas not covered by ice, the combination of cold temperatures and strong winds created periglacial environments, characterized by permafrost, ground that remained frozen for at least 2 consecutive years. This permafrost led to unique landforms like patterned ground, where the repeated freezing and thawing of soil-sorted stones into geometric shapes, and pingos, which are ice-cored mounds. The overall climate was one of extremes, with long, cold winters and short, cool summers, and a constant battle against the elements for any life that managed to survive outside the immediate vicinity of the ice sheets. This combination of cold, dryness, and relentless wind created a stark and challenging world. The Ice Age ecosystem was a dynamic web of life, where large herbivores, the prey, were constantly interacting with powerful carnivores, the hunters. This intricate food chain was shaped by the harsh environment, leading to specialized hunting techniques and defensive adaptations. The sheer size of many Ice Age animals meant that predators had to be equally formidable to survive. Among the most fearsome hunters was the saber-toothed cat, Smilodon fatalis in North America, and other Smilodon species elsewhere. These magnificent predators are famous for their incredibly long, dagger-like canine teeth, which could reach up to 7 inches in length. Despite their common name, saber-toothed cats were not true cats in the modern sense, but belonged to a distinct, extinct lineage of felids. Their body build was robust and muscular, more like a bear than a modern leopard or lion, suggesting they were ambush predators rather than pursuit hunters. Their powerful forelimbs were adapted for grappling and holding down large prey. The long canines were likely used for a precise killing bite, severing the windpipe or major blood vessels in the throat or belly of their victims, causing rapid blood loss. These teeth were surprisingly fragile and not designed for chewing bone or struggling with prey. Therefore, it is believed that Smilodon would have needed to subdue its prey quickly and efficiently before delivering the fatal bite. Their prey included large, slow-moving herbivores such as mammoths, mastodons, ground sloths, and bison. Evidence from fossil sites, particularly the La Brea tar pits, suggests that Smilodon may have lived in social groups, as many individuals of different ages are found together, implying cooperative hunting or at least social scavenging, which would have been advantageous for tackling such immense prey. Another dominant predator was the dire wolf, Canis dirus. These wolves were larger and more heavily built than modern grey wolves, weighing up to 150 pounds. Their robust jaws and teeth were well suited for crushing bone, indicating that they were powerful hunters and likely also efficient scavengers. Dire wolves were social animals, hunting in packs, a strategy that allowed them to take down large prey. Their primary targets included bison, horses, camels, and even young mammoths or mastodons. Pack hunting would have enabled them to wear down large animals through sustained pursuit and coordinated attacks, a stark contrast to the ambush tactics of the saber-toothed cats. The social structure of dire wolves likely mirrored that of modern wolves, with complex communication and cooperation within the pack. The cave lion, Panthera spelaea, was one of the largest felids to have ever lived, even bigger than modern African lions. It roamed across much of Eurasia and into North America. Despite its name, it did not exclusively live in caves but used them for shelter and raising cubs. Cave lions were powerful and agile predators, likely hunting large and medium-sized herbivores such as reindeer, horses, steppe bison, and young mammoths. While the social structure of cave lions is debated, some evidence suggests they may have lived in smaller groups or been more solitary than modern lions, perhaps due to the more dispersed nature of their prey in colder environments. Their hunting strategy would have involved stealth and a powerful pounce, relying on their strength to overpower prey. Cave bears, Ursus spelaeus, were enormous, reaching sizes comparable to modern polar bears. While their teeth suggest a largely herbivorous diet, primarily feeding on plants, berries, and roots. They were opportunistic omnivores and would have scavenged carrion when available. They were not typically active hunters of large, live prey, but were formidable animals capable of defending themselves against other predators. Their primary role in the ecosystem was as large consumers of plant matter and occasional scavengers, and they spent significant time hibernating in caves, which is where their name originates. Other significant predators included the short-faced bear, Arctodus simus, in North America, which was an exceptionally fast and powerful carnivore, possibly an active hunter of a large game or a highly efficient scavenger. Spotted hyenas, Crocuta crocuta, also extended their range into Ice Age Eurasia, acting as both hunters and crucial scavengers, cleaning up carcasses left by other predators. The challenges for these hunters were immense. The extreme cold meant that energy expenditure for hunting was high, and prey could be scarce or widely dispersed. Large prey animals were also dangerous, capable of inflicting serious injury or death on their attackers. This led to a co-evolutionary arms race, where prey animals developed defensive adaptations like large size, thick hides, powerful kicks and herd behavior, while predators evolved specialized tools like the saber-tooth or cooperative hunting strategies. Humans, Homo sapiens, also emerged as apex predators during the later stages of the Ice Age. Early human hunters developed sophisticated techniques, using spears, atlatls, spear throwers, and traps. They often hunted in groups, employing strategies like driving animals into natural traps or off cliffs. Their ability to plan, communicate, and create advanced tools allowed them to target even the largest megafauna. The interaction between human hunters and the megafauna is a complex topic, with debates about the extent of human impact on the extinctions that occurred at the end of the Ice Age. However, it is clear that humans became a significant force in the food chain, competing with and sometimes outcompeting other large carnivores for resources. The intricate balance of these hunter-prey relationships was a defining characteristic of the Ice Age world, a testament to the raw power and survival instincts of both predator and prey. The term ancient forests during the Ice Age does not typically refer to the dense, warm, and highly diverse forests we often imagine today. Instead, the vegetation of the Ice Age was profoundly shaped by the cold climate, leading to unique biomes dominated by cold-adapted plants. The primary vegetation types were tundra, taiga, and vast cold grasslands, often referred to as the Mammoth steppe. These plant communities were crucial in supporting the immense animal life of the period. Tundra was the most widespread vegetation type in the regions adjacent to the massive ice sheets and at high latitudes. It is characterized by its treeless nature, primarily due to the presence of permafrost, permanently frozen ground, which prevents the growth of deep-rooted trees. The top layer of soil thaws only briefly during the short, cool summers, allowing for the growth of low-lying vegetation. The plants found in tundra environments were typically mosses, lichens, sedges, grasses, and dwarf shrubs such as willow and birch. These plants have evolved specific adaptations to survive the harsh conditions. Their low growth form protects them from strong winds and allows them to be insulated by snow cover, and they have short growing seasons, completing their life cycle quickly during the brief summer. Their shallow root systems are necessary because they cannot penetrate the permafrost. Despite its seemingly barren appearance, the tundra was a vital ecosystem, providing the primary food source for many cold-adapted herbivores like reindeer, musk oxen, and lemmings. It was a resilient ecosystem, capable of supporting a surprising amount of life in extreme conditions. South of the tundra, in slightly less extreme cold, lay the taiga, also known as the boreal forest. This biome is characterized by coniferous trees, which are well suited to cold climates. The dominant species included various types of spruces, firs, pines, and larch. These trees have needle-like leaves, which are adapted to reduce water loss through transpiration and are covered in a waxy coating to prevent freezing. Their conical shape allows snow to shed easily, preventing branches from breaking under heavy loads. The taiga provided important shelter and food for some animal species, acting as a transition zone between the open tundra and more temperate regions. While not as extensive as today's boreal forests, patches of taiga existed in areas where conditions allowed, such as in sheltered valleys or at lower elevations. Perhaps the most significant and widespread vegetation type during the Ice Age was the cold grassland, often referred to as the Mammoth steppe or a Mammoth tundra steppe. This was a vast, treeless biome that stretched across much of Eurasia and North America, replacing what are now often forests or deserts. Despite the cold, these grasslands were surprisingly productive and diverse, dominated by various species of grasses, sedges, and herbaceous flowering plants. Unlike modern temperate grasslands, the Mammoth steppe was adapted to cold, dry conditions, often with permafrost beneath. The high productivity of these grasslands, even in cold conditions, was crucial for supporting the enormous populations of large grazing herbivores, including woolly mammoths, steppe bison, horses, and woolly rhinos. These animals, in turn, helped to maintain the steppe by grazing and trampling, preventing the growth of trees and shrubs. The Mammoth steppe was a unique ecosystem, different from any found on Earth today, and its disappearance at the end of the Ice Age coincided with the extinction of many of the large animals it supported. Other types of vegetation existed in more localized areas, along rivers and in sheltered valleys, where moisture was more abundant and temperatures slightly milder. Gallery forests or patches of deciduous trees might have grown. These areas would have provided important refugia for species less adapted to the open, cold steppe. The distribution of these vegetation zones was highly dynamic, shifting north and south with the advances and retreats of the glaciers and in response to changes in global temperature and precipitation. The study of ancient vegetation relies heavily on scientific evidence. Pollen analysis, examining fossilized pollen grains preserved in lake sediments, peat bogs, and ice cores, provides detailed information about the types of plants that grew in different regions over time. Macrofossils such as preserved leaves, seeds, and wood fragments offer direct evidence of plant species. Furthermore, the analysis of fossilized stomach contents from well-preserved herbivores, like those found in the permafrost, gives direct insight into their diets and the plants they consumed. These lines of evidence paint a picture of a world where plant life, though different from today, was incredibly resilient and formed the foundation of a complex and thriving ecosystem that supported a diverse array of animal life, from the smallest insects to the largest megafauna. The unique characteristics of these ancient plant communities were fundamental to the survival and success of the Ice Age world. The Ice Age was not just a time of giant animals and vast ice sheets. It was also a crucial period in the story of human evolution, witnessing the presence and development of early human groups who adapted to and thrived in these challenging conditions. Primarily, two distinct human populations inhabited the Ice Age world: the Neanderthals and early modern humans, also known as Cro-Magnons. Their lives were a testament to human ingenuity and resilience in the face of extreme cold and resource scarcity. Neanderthals, Homo neanderthalensis, were a species of archaic human that lived across Eurasia, from Western Europe to Central Asia and the Middle East. They first appeared in the fossil record approximately 400,000 years ago and vanished around 40,000 years ago, overlapping with the arrival of modern humans in Europe. Physically, Neanderthals were robustly built, even more so than modern humans. They had shorter, stockier limbs, broad chests, and powerful muscles, adaptations that would have helped them conserve body heat in cold environments, following Bergmann's rule, which suggests that larger body sizes are advantageous in colder climates due to a smaller surface area to volume ratio. Their skulls were elongated, with prominent brow ridges and a large nose, which may have helped to warm and humidify the cold, dry air they breathed. Their brains were, on average, slightly larger than those of modern humans, though the organization of their brains might have differed. Neanderthals were highly skilled hunters, primarily targeting large game such as woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, bison, and reindeer. They used close-range hunting tactics, relying on strength and heavy thrusting spears, which put them at considerable risk. Evidence from their skeletons shows frequent bone fractures, consistent with injuries sustained during close encounters with large animals. They lived in small, mobile groups, often sheltering in caves or rock shelters, but also building temporary structures in open areas. Their diet was heavily reliant on meat, but they also gathered plants, fruits, and nuts when available. There is evidence of Neanderthal care for the sick and injured, as well as intentional burials, suggesting a degree of compassion and symbolic thought. Their technology, characterized by Mousterian stone tools, was effective but generally less varied and complex than that of later modern humans. They mastered fire, which was essential for warmth, cooking, and protection from predators. Early modern humans, Homo sapiens, emerged in Africa roughly 300,000 years ago and began to migrate out of Africa in waves, with a significant dispersal occurring around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago. They arrived in Europe, a region already inhabited by Neanderthals, approximately 45,000 to 40,000 years ago. Physically, early modern humans were generally taller and more slender than Neanderthals, with less robust bones and smaller faces. Their body proportions were more adapted for long-distance movement and heat dissipation, reflecting their African origins, though they also developed cultural adaptations to cold, such as tailored clothing. Their brains, while similar in size to Neanderthals, are thought to have had different internal organization, possibly contributing to their more complex cognitive abilities. The arrival of early modern humans in Europe, often referred to as Cro-Magnons, after a famous fossil site in France, marked a period of significant technological and cultural innovation. They developed more sophisticated hunting tools, including lighter, more accurate throwing spears, and later, the bow and arrow. Their toolkits were more diverse, featuring blades, burins for engraving, and specialized tools made from bone, antler, and ivory. This advanced technology allowed them to hunt more efficiently and exploit a wider range of resources. They also developed complex social structures, extensive trade networks, and symbolic behaviors that are evident in their elaborate cave art, personal ornaments, and burials. Unlike Neanderthals, who primarily use local stone, modern humans often sourced high-quality flint from distant quarries, indicating a more organized approach to resource management and possibly trade. The period of overlap between Neanderthals and early modern humans in Europe, lasting for several thousand years, is a subject of intense study. While the exact nature of their interactions is debated, genetic evidence suggests that interbreeding occurred, meaning that many people of non-African descent today carry a small percentage of Neanderthal DNA. The reasons for the Neanderthals' disappearance are complex and likely multifactorial, including climate change, competition with modern humans for resources, and possibly a lower birth rate or greater susceptibility to diseases. It is unlikely to have been a single cause, but rather a combination of pressures that ultimately led to their extinction. Both Neanderthals and early modern humans were remarkably successful at surviving the challenges of the Ice Age. They were skilled at finding food, making shelter, and creating tools to help them adapt. Their presence across vast, often frozen landscapes demonstrates the incredible adaptability of the human lineage. They lived in small, mobile groups, constantly moving to follow animal herds or find seasonal plant resources. Their survival depended on a deep understanding of their environment, the behavior of animals, and the properties of different materials for toolmaking. They passed down knowledge through generations, ensuring the continuity of their cultures in a world that demanded constant innovation and resilience. The Ice Age was not merely a backdrop to human existence, it was a crucible that forged the physical and cognitive traits that define humanity. The survival of early humans during the Ice Age was inextricably linked to their ability to create and use tools. These Stone Age tools, named for the primary material used, were not just simple implements, but sophisticated technologies that evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, allowing humans to hunt, process food, prepare hides, and craft other necessities for life in a harsh world. The materials chosen were often those readily available and possessing specific properties, primarily stone, but also bone, antler, and wood. Stone was the fundamental material for toolmaking. Early humans sought out specific types of stone that fractured in a predictable way, producing sharp edges. Flint and chert were highly prized due to their fine-grained structure, which allowed for precise control during shaping. Obsidian, a volcanic glass, was also used where available, producing exceptionally sharp edges, though it was more brittle. The basic technique for shaping stone was called flint knapping, a process that involved striking a core stone with another stone, a hammerstone, or a softer material like antler or wood, a soft hammer. This removed flakes, leaving behind a sharp edge on the core or creating usable flakes themselves. The earliest and most enduring stone tool was the hand axe. These bifacial tools, shaped on both sides, were versatile implements used for a wide range of tasks, including butchering large animals, digging for roots, and chopping wood. They were typically teardrop-shaped and fit comfortably in the hand. Over time, hand axes became more refined, with sharper edges and more symmetrical forms. As human technology advanced, the focus shifted from core tools like hand axes to flake tools, where sharp flakes struck from a core were used as the primary implements. This was a more efficient use of raw material, as many sharp tools could be produced from a single stone core. Scrapers were another essential category of tool. These were flakes with one or more edges blunted for comfortable handling and another edge carefully sharpened for scraping. They were primarily used for processing animal hides, removing flesh and fat to prepare them for tanning, making them soft and pliable for clothing, shelter, or containers. The ability to make warm, durable clothing from animal hides was critical for survival in the Ice Age cold. Different types of scrapers existed, including side scrapers and end scrapers, each suited for specific tasks. Blades represented a significant technological leap. A blade is a flake that is at least twice as long as it is wide, with parallel sides. These were produced using more advanced flint knapping techniques, often involving a prepared core from which multiple blades could be struck. Blades provided long, sharp cutting edges, far more efficient than earlier flake tools. They could be used as knives for butchering, or further modified into other specialized tools. Points were crucial for hunting. These were carefully shaped stone flakes or blades, often triangular or leaf-shaped, designed to be hafted or attached to the end of a spear or dart. Early points were simply sharpened stone tips, but later innovations included the development of spear throwers or atlatls, which significantly increased the range and power of a thrown spear. Towards the end of the Ice Age, the invention of the bow and arrow led to even smaller, more finely crafted points, known as arrowheads, allowing for more precise and distant hunting. Beyond stone, early humans also made extensive use of organic materials. Bone and antler were particularly valuable because they could be shaped into durable tools that were difficult to make from stone. Awls, pointed tools made from bone or antler, were used for piercing holes in hides for sewing. Needles, often made from bone or ivory with a small eye, allowed for the creation of tailored clothing, a major advantage in cold climates. Harpoons with barbed points were crafted from bone or antler for fishing. These tools demonstrate a sophisticated understanding of different materials and their properties. Wood was undoubtedly used extensively, though it rarely survives in the archaeological record. Wooden spears were likely among the earliest hunting tools. Wood would also have been used for digging sticks, handles for stone tools, and components of shelters. The perishable nature of wood means that our understanding of its role in Stone Age technology is less complete than that of stone or bone. The evolution of tool technology throughout the Ice Age reflects a growing cognitive complexity and adaptability in human populations. Early tools were simple and multi-purpose. Over hundreds of thousands of years, tools became more specialized, more efficient, and required greater skill and planning to produce. This progression, from Acheulean hand axes to Mysterian flake tools, and then to the Upper Paleolithic blade and microlithic technologies, demonstrates a continuous refinement of manufacturing techniques and a deeper understanding of material science. The ability to consistently produce sharp, effective tools from raw materials was a fundamental skill that allowed early humans to survive and eventually thrive in diverse and often challenging environments, shaping their daily lives, their hunting strategies, and their ability to process resources. Tools were not just objects. They were extensions of human capability, enabling them to exert greater control over their environment and secure their place in the Ice Age world. Among the most captivating legacies of Ice Age humans are the extraordinary paintings, engravings, and sculptures found deep within caves across Europe and other parts of the world. This cave art provides a unique window into the minds, beliefs, and daily lives of our ancient ancestors, revealing a level of artistic skill and symbolic thought that continues to astound modern observers. These artworks are not mere doodles. They are complex compositions, often found in remote dark chambers, suggesting they held profound significance. The most famous examples of Ice Age cave art are found in Western Europe, particularly in France and Spain. Iconic sites include Lascaux and Chauvet Cave in France and Altamira in Spain. Chauvet Cave, discovered in 1994, contains some of the oldest known cave paintings, dating back approximately 32,000 to 37,000 years ago. Lascaux, discovered in 1940, features stunning artwork from around 17,000 years ago. Altamira, with its famous bison, dates to about 14,000 years ago. These sites, and many others, showcase a consistent artistic tradition over tens of thousands of years. The subjects depicted in cave art are overwhelmingly animals. The species chosen reflect the megafauna that roamed the Ice Age landscapes: woolly mammoths, bison, both European bison and steppe bison, horses, often depicted with shaggy manes, woolly rhinoceroses, reindeer, lions, cave lions, bears, cave bears, and sometimes even extinct species like the giant deer. These animals are often rendered with remarkable anatomical accuracy and a sense of movement and vitality. The artists captured the essence of these creatures, often using the natural contours of the cave walls to enhance the three-dimensional effect of their subjects. While animal figures dominate, human figures are rare and often depicted schematically, or as hybrids, part human, part animal. Abstract symbols, dots, lines, and geometric shapes are also common, their meaning still largely unknown. Hand stencils, created by blowing pigment over a hand pressed against the wall, are also a frequent motif. The materials used for these artworks were derived from natural mineral pigments found in the environment. Red, yellow, and brown colours were obtained from ochre, an iron oxide mineral. Black was typically made from charcoal, burnt wood, or manganese dioxide. White was sometimes derived from kaolin clay. These pigments were ground into fine powders and mixed with binders, such as animal fat, blood, or water, to create paint. The artists applied the paint using various techniques. Some paintings appear to have been applied directly with fingers or pads of moss. Others show evidence of brushes made from animal hair or plant fibres. A common technique, especially for creating outlines or filling in large areas, involved blowing powdered pigment through a hollow bone or reed, creating a spray paint effect. Engravings were made by scratching or cutting into the rock surface using sharp stone tools. In some caves, evidence of scaffolding or ladders suggests that artists worked on high ceilings, indicating a significant effort and planning. The purpose and meaning of Ice Age cave art are subjects of ongoing debate among archaeologists and anthropologists. There is no single, universally accepted explanation, and it is likely that the art served multiple functions. One prominent theory suggests a magical or ritualistic purpose, perhaps to ensure successful hunts or to increase the fertility of animal populations. Depicting animals with spears or arrows embedded in them could have been a form of sympathetic magic, intended to bring about a successful hunt in reality. Another theory proposes that the art was part of initiation rituals for young hunters, or served as a way to transmit knowledge about animal behaviour and hunting techniques across generations. Some scholars believe the art reflects shamanistic practices, where shamans entered altered states of consciousness to communicate with the spirit world, and the animal images represented spirits or visions. Other interpretations suggest that the art was a form of storytelling, recording important events, myths, or ancestral narratives. The abstract symbols might represent complex ideas, astronomical observations, or territorial markers. Some argue that the art was simply an aesthetic expression, a way for early humans to beautify their surroundings or to express their innate creativity. The placement of art deep within dark, inaccessible parts of caves suggests a sacred or private context, not for public display. The presence of handprints and the repetition of certain motifs might indicate a form of individual or group identity. Regardless of the specific meaning, cave art undeniably tells us a great deal about the daily lives, beliefs, and environment of Ice Age humans. It demonstrates their keen observational skills and deep understanding of the animals they hunted and lived alongside. The art reveals their reliance on these animals for survival, not just as food, but as central figures in their worldview. It shows their capacity for abstract thought, symbolism, and complex communication. The effort involved in creating these artworks, preparing pigments, navigating dark caves, and executing intricate designs, speaks to a highly developed culture with specialized roles and shared purposes. Cave art is a powerful testament to the intellectual and creative sophistication of our ancestors, proving that even in the harsh realities of the Ice Age, the human spirit sought to express itself, to understand its world, and to leave a lasting mark. During the Ice Age, early humans, including both Neanderthals and early modern humans, lived in settlements that range from temporary hunting camps to more semi-permanent residences, depending on the season, available resources, and the specific cultural practices of the group. These camps were the focal points of their daily lives, providing shelter, a place for tool-making, food preparation, and social interaction. Understanding how these communities functioned offers insight into the resilience and adaptability of our ancestors in a challenging environment. Shelters varied significantly based on location and available materials. In areas with natural rock formations, caves and rock shelters were frequently used. These offered natural protection from the elements, including wind, rain, and snow, and provided a stable temperature. Within caves, humans often built additional structures, such as windbreaks or sleeping platforms, using animal hides, wood, or even bones. For instance, archaeological evidence from some European cave sites shows post holes and hearths strategically placed within the cave, indicating organised living spaces. The consistent use of specific caves over long periods, sometimes for thousands of years, suggests that these locations became familiar and important hubs for groups moving across the landscape. In open landscapes, particularly in the vast steppes of Eastern Europe and Siberia, where natural shelters were scarce, early humans constructed elaborate temporary dwellings. These often utilised the remains of large Ice Age animals, most notably mammoth bones. Sites like Mazirich in Ukraine show evidence of circular or oval structures built from dozens, sometimes hundreds, of mammoth skulls, femurs and pelves, arranged to form a sturdy framework. These bone structures were likely covered with animal hides, such as mammoth or reindeer skins, to create insulated and weatherproof shelters. The sheer effort required to collect, transport and arrange such a large quantity of bones indicates a high degree of communal organisation and planning. Some structures featured multiple hearths inside, suggesting division of living spaces or used by multiple family units. These bone houses, though temporary in the grand scheme, could serve as seasonal bases, providing relatively stable accommodation for weeks or months. Other materials for open-air shelters included wood, though its preservation is rare. Evidence from some sites points to circular arrangements of post holes, indicating structures built with wooden poles, likely covered with hides or brush. In areas with access to readily available smaller animal bones, such as reindeer antlers, these were also used in less substantial, more easily assembled shelters for short-term camps. The mobility of groups meant that shelters often needed to be quickly erected and dismantled, or easily abandoned and rebuilt. The functioning of these early human communities revolved around basic survival needs, acquiring food, staying warm, and protecting themselves from predators. The division of labour was likely present, with some individuals focusing on hunting, others on gathering plant resources, and still others on preparing food, making tools, or maintaining the camp. Hunting parties would venture out, often for days, to track and kill large game. Back at the camp, the successful hunt would lead to communal butchering, where specialised stone tools were used to process the carcass efficiently. Meat was consumed fresh, dried for preservation, or rendered for fat. Hides were meticulously scraped and tanned using tools and possibly animal brains, then used for clothing, blankets, and tent coverings. Bone and antler were crafted into tools, weapons, and even ornaments. Fire was central to camp life. Hearths were carefully constructed and maintained, providing warmth, light, a means to cook food, and protection from dangerous animals. The presence of multiple hearths in larger camps suggests family units gathered around their own fires, contributing to a sense of community while also maintaining individual space. Cooking was essential not only for making food palatable, but also for breaking down tough fibres and making nutrients more accessible, especially from meat. Fire also allowed for the hardening of wooden spear tips and the processing of other raw materials. Social structures in these early human camps are largely inferred from archaeological evidence and comparisons with modern hunter-gatherer societies. Groups were likely small, consisting of several families, perhaps 25 to 50 individuals, which was an optimal size for communal hunting and resource sharing, without over-depleting local resources. Decisions were likely made communally or by respected elders. The sharing of food, especially from large game, would have been a crucial social mechanism, reinforcing bonds and ensuring the survival of all group members, including the sick or injured who could not participate in hunting. Evidence of care for elderly or disabled individuals, such as the Neanderthal old man of La Chapelle-aux-Saints, who lived for years with severe disabilities, suggests a strong sense of community and empathy. Camps also served as centres for knowledge transmission. Skills like toolmaking, hunting techniques, and knowledge of the landscape and animal behaviour would have been taught and learned within the camp environment. The sharing of stories, experiences and observations around the campfire would have been vital for cultural continuity and for passing on critical survival information from one generation to the next. The presence of personal ornaments such as beads and pendants, as well as the creation of cave art in nearby areas, suggests that camp life also included time for artistic expression, symbolic rituals, and the development of complex cultural identities. These settlements were not just physical shelters, but vibrant social hubs where the foundations of human culture were forged in the crucible of the Ice Age. During the Ice Age, a significant portion of the Earth's water was locked up in massive continental ice sheets, leading to a substantial drop in global sea levels. This reduction in sea level exposed large areas of continental shelf that are normally submerged underwater. These exposed land masses acted as natural land bridges, connecting continents that are now separated by oceans or shallow seas. These land bridges were critical pathways, allowing for the movement of animals, plants, and crucially, early human populations across vast geographical distances. The most famous and impactful of these land bridges was Beringia, often referred to as the Bering Land Bridge. This vast stretch of land connected northeastern Asia, Siberia, with northwestern North America, Alaska. Today, the Bering Strait, a narrow body of water, separates these two continents. However, during the last glacial maximum, when global sea levels were at their lowest, approximately 20,000 to 26,000 years ago, Beringia was a wide, unglaciated landmass, possibly 1,000 miles wide at its greatest extent. It was not a narrow strip, but a significant territory with its own ecosystems. Due to its position relative to the ice sheets, which drew moisture from the atmosphere, Beringia remained largely ice-free, instead supporting a cold, grassy steppe environment, similar to the Mammoth steppe found in other parts of Eurasia. This environment provided forage for various Ice Age animals, including woolly mammoths, steppe bison, horses, and reindeer. Beringia served as a vital corridor for the dispersal of these animal species between Asia and North America. Animals that had evolved in Eurasia could cross into North America and vice versa. This exchange enriched the biodiversity of both continents and led to the evolution of a new species adapted to the environments they encountered. For example, ancestors of modern American bison, horses and camels originated in Asia and migrated into North America via Beringia. Similarly, some North American species, though fewer, migrated westward into Asia. Beyond Beringia, other land bridges also played significant roles in shaping global biogeography. The Sahel Shelf, located between mainland Australia and New Guinea, became exposed during periods of lower sea level, creating a continuous landmass. This land bridge was crucial for the early human colonisation of Australia, allowing populations to migrate from Southeast Asia. Similarly, Sunderland, a land bridge connecting mainland Southeast Asia with the islands of Sumatra, Borneo and Java, was exposed during glacial periods, facilitating the movement of animals and early human populations across what are now island nations. These connections enabled the early dispersal of Homo sapiens throughout island Southeast Asia and into Oceania. Another notable example includes the connection between present-day Great Britain and continental Europe. During glacial periods, lower sea levels exposed a land bridge known as Doggerland, which was a large low-lying area in what is now the southern North Sea. This land bridge facilitated the movement of animals and early human groups between the British Isles and the rest of Europe. As sea levels rose at the end of the Ice Age, Doggerland became submerged, creating the English Channel and isolating Britain. The formation of land bridges was directly linked to the fluctuating volume of global ice sheets. As ice sheets grew, they drew vast amounts of water from the oceans, causing sea levels to drop. When the ice sheets melted, this water returned to the oceans, and sea levels rose, submerging the land bridges. This cyclical process meant that these land connections were not permanently open, but appeared and disappeared over thousands of years, creating windows of opportunity for migration. The lowest sea levels occurred during the last glacial maximum, when global sea levels were approximately 100 to 120 meters, or about 330 to 400 feet, lower than they are today. This massive drop in sea level exposed vast expanses of continental shelves worldwide, creating numerous smaller, localized land bridges in addition to the major ones. The existence of these land bridges had profound implications for human history. Beringia, in particular, is central to the theory of how humans first arrived in the Americas. It allowed for the movement of people and their associated technologies and cultural practices from Asia into a new continent. The ability to cross these land bridges meant that early human populations, who were hunter-gatherers, could follow migratory animal herds, access new hunting grounds, and explore new territories, ultimately leading to the global dispersal of our species. The opening and closing of these bridges also influenced patterns of human settlement, cultural development, and genetic diversity across continents. The land bridges were dynamic corridors, shaping not only the distribution of ancient ecosystems, but also the very path of human migration across the planet. The initial peopling of the Americas is a topic of intense scientific study, and the prevailing theory centers on the migration of early modern humans from Asia into North America, primarily via the Bering Land Bridge. This monumental journey, undertaken by intrepid hunter-gatherers during the Ice Age, led to the eventual spread of humans across two vast continents, from the Arctic Circle to the southern tip of South America. The journey began in Northeast Asia, likely in regions like Siberia, where hunter-gatherer populations had adapted to cold, steppe environments. As mentioned, during the last glacial maximum, roughly 26,000 to 20,000 years ago, lower global sea levels exposed the Bering Land Bridge, a wide landmass connecting Siberia and Alaska. This land bridge, Beringia, was not glaciated and supported a cold, productive grassland ecosystem, making it habitable for animals and the humans who hunted them. It is believed that early human groups following the migratory patterns of animals such as woolly mammoths, bison and horses gradually moved across Beringia into what is now Alaska. This movement was likely not a single, rapid migration, but rather a gradual expansion of populations over thousands of years, with groups inhabiting Beringia for extended periods, perhaps even thousands of years, before pushing further into the American continents. The timing of the initial entry into North America is a subject of ongoing debate. For many decades, the Clovis culture, characterized by distinctive fluted stone spear points, was considered the earliest widespread human culture in the Americas, dating to approximately 13,500 to 12,800 years ago. However, archaeological discoveries over the past few decades have provided compelling evidence for pre-Clovis settlements, indicating that humans arrived in the Americas much earlier. Sites like Monteverde in Chile, dating back at least 14,500 years, and Paisley Caves in Oregon, with evidence of human presence around 14,500 years ago, strongly support a pre-Clovis entry. This means that humans were in the Americas before the land bridge was fully open, and potentially before an ice-free corridor became viable for land travel further south. Once in Alaska, the path south was initially blocked by two massive ice sheets, the Laurentide ice sheet to the east and the Cordilleran ice sheet to the west, which covered much of present-day Canada. For a long time, it was thought that humans had to wait for an ice-free corridor to open between these two ice sheets before they could move south. This corridor, which did eventually form, became viable around 14,000 to 13,500 years ago. However, the evidence for pre-Clovis sites south of the ice sheets suggests that some early migrants may have utilized a different route, a coastal migration. This coastal migration hypothesis proposes that early humans moved down the Pacific coast of North America, possibly using boats or rafts, following a kelp highway of productive marine ecosystems. This route would have been viable even when the interior was blocked by ice, allowing for earlier dispersal. Regardless of the precise timing and initial route, once humans were south of the major ice sheets, their spread across North and South America was remarkably rapid. Within a few thousand years after their initial entry, archaeological sites appear across vast geographical distances. These early American populations were highly adaptable hunter-gatherers, skilled at exploiting diverse environments. They hunted the abundant megafauna, including mammoths, mastodons, giant sloths, and saber-toothed cats, using their stone tools and hunting techniques. They also adapted to local resources, incorporating fish, shellfish, birds, and a wide variety of plant foods into their diets. The spread across North America saw different cultural adaptations emerge as groups moved into distinct ecosystems, from the Great Plains to the forested east and the arid southwest. In South America, the pace of expansion was equally swift, with humans reaching the southernmost tip of Patagonia within 2,000 years of their arrival on the continent. This rapid dispersal is a testament to their mobility, their ability to adapt to new environments, and their deep knowledge of hunting and foraging strategies. The journey of the first Americans was not without challenges. They faced unfamiliar landscapes, new predators, and varying climates. Yet their ingenuity, social cohesion, and technological skills allowed them to colonize a vast uninhabited continent. The genetic evidence from modern Native American populations strongly supports a common ancestral origin in Asia, with genetic diversity decreasing as one moves south, indicating a clear pattern of southward expansion from an initial entry point in the north. The America's First narrative is a compelling story of exploration, adaptation, and the enduring human drive to discover and inhabit new worlds, forever changing the biological and cultural landscape of the Western Hemisphere. During the last glacial period, which largely spanned from about 110,000 to 12,000 years ago, Europe was profoundly shaped by vast ice sheets and extremely cold climates. This era, often synonymous with the European Upper Paleolithic, witnessed the flourishing of distinct human cultures, including both Neanderthals and later, early modern humans, who adapted remarkably to these harsh conditions. The continent became a dynamic zone of advancing and retreating ice, vast tundras, and formidable megafauna, defining the lives of its inhabitants. At the peak of the Ice Age, known as the last glacial maximum, approximately 26,000 to 20,000 years ago, northern Europe was covered by the massive Scandinavian ice sheet. This immense glacier originated in the mountains of Scandinavia and spread across the Baltic Sea, covering all of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and extending into parts of present-day Denmark, Germany, Poland, and Russia. It also engulfed the entire British Isles, except for some small, isolated mountain peaks in the south. The thickness of this ice sheet reached several thousand feet in its centre, profoundly scraping and carving the landscape, creating the fjords of Norway and the numerous lakes of Finland. To the south of this dominant ice mass, much of Western and Central Europe experienced periglacial conditions. This meant that while not directly under ice, the ground was permanently frozen to significant depths, a phenomenon known as permafrost. The landscape was characterized by treeless tundra and cold steppe environments, marked by features like patterned ground and pingos, formed by the repeated freezing and thawing of soil. Further south, in regions like the Mediterranean basin, the climate was cooler and drier than today. While not subject to continental glaciation, mountainous areas such as the Alps and the Pyrenees developed extensive valley glaciers. These changes in climate led to a shift in vegetation zones. Forests retreated to isolated refugia in southern Europe, replaced by expansive grasslands and tundras that supported large herds of grazing animals. The human inhabitants of Ice Age Europe adapted to these challenging conditions with ingenuity. The earliest human presence during this period consisted of Neanderthals. They were well established across Europe, having evolved there over hundreds of thousands of years. Their robust physical build with stocky limbs and broad torsos was an adaptation to conserve heat. Neanderthals were skilled hunters, primarily using thrusting spears in close-range encounters with large animals like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, bison, and wild horses. Archaeological evidence from sites like La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France shows their capacity for caring for the sick and elderly, suggesting complex social structures. Their stone tool technology, known as musterion, was effective for various tasks including butchering and hide preparation. They often utilized natural caves and rock shelters for habitation, supplementing these with temporary outdoor structures. Around 45,000 to 40,000 years ago, Early modern humans, Homo sapiens, arrived in Europe, having migrated from Africa and the Middle East. Their arrival marked the beginning of the Upper Paleolithic period, characterized by significant technological and cultural innovations. These Cro-Magnons, as they are sometimes called, brought with them a more diverse and specialized toolkit, featuring finely crafted blade tools made from stone, as well as tools made from bone, antler, and ivory. This included specialized points for spears and arrows, burins for engraving, and needles for sewing. The ability to create tailored clothing from animal hides using bone needles was a crucial adaptation for surviving the intense cold, providing much better insulation than simple wraps. Early modern humans in Europe were highly efficient hunters, utilizing sophisticated strategies such as organized drives and ambushes, and developing projectile weapons that allowed for safer, long-distance hunting. They exploited a wide range of animal resources, from large game to smaller animals, fish and birds, demonstrating a broad-spectrum economy. Their settlements included both caves and open-air sites, where they constructed elaborate dwellings, sometimes using mammoth bones as structural elements, as seen at sites like Mazirich in Ukraine. Culturally, the Upper Paleolithic is renowned for its explosion of symbolic expression. This includes the spectacular cave art found at sites like Lascaux and Chauvet in France, and Altamira in Spain, depicting animals with striking realism and dynamism. These artworks, created using mineral pigments and complex techniques, are thought to have had ritualistic, magical, or educational purposes. Beyond cave art, early modern humans produced a variety of portable art, such as carved figurines of animals and humans, like the Venus figurines, beads and pendants, indicating the development of personal ornamentation and symbolic thought. They also engaged in complex burial practices, sometimes with grave goods, suggesting beliefs in an afterlife or ritual significance for the deceased. The interaction between Neanderthals and early modern humans during their period of overlap in Europe is a subject of ongoing research. Genetic evidence confirms interbreeding between the two groups. The reasons for the eventual disappearance of Neanderthals around 40,000 to 39,000 years ago are complex, likely involving a combination of factors such as climatic fluctuations, demographic pressures from modern humans, and possible differences in adaptability or reproductive rates. The period saw dramatic shifts in climate, including a particularly abrupt cold snap known as the Younger Dryas, which occurred at the very end of the Ice Age, around 12,900 to 11,700 years ago. Despite the challenges, human cultures in Ice Age Europe demonstrated remarkable resilience, innovation, and artistic sophistication, laying many of the foundations for later human development. Asia, the largest continent, experienced the Ice Age in a vast and varied manner, from the immense ice sheets of Siberia to the more subtle climatic shifts in its southern regions. During the last glacial period, which concluded about 12,000 years ago, much of northern Asia was profoundly impacted by extreme cold, permafrost, and extensive grasslands. This vast landmass served as a crucial stage for the evolution and migration of early human populations, including the ancestors of the first Americans. Northern Asia, particularly Siberia, was characterized by periglacial conditions. While not entirely covered by a continuous continental ice sheet like North America or Europe, vast areas experienced permanently frozen ground known as permafrost. Mountainous regions, such as the Himalayas, the Altai, and the Tibetan Plateau, developed extensive mountain glaciers and ice caps. The northern plains of Siberia were dominated by the Mammoth steppe, a unique and highly productive cold grassland ecosystem. This steppe, stretching from eastern Europe across Siberia and into Beringia, supported huge herds of Ice Age megafauna, including woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, steppe bison, and horses. These animals provided abundant resources for the human populations inhabiting the region. The climate in much of northern and central Asia was extremely cold and dry, with strong winds sweeping across the treeless plains. Dust from glaciated areas was carried by these winds, forming vast loose deposits, particularly in parts of China, which are highly fertile today. The aridity also led to the expansion of deserts in some Central Asian regions. Southeast Asia, while not directly glaciated, experienced cooler temperatures and significantly lower sea levels. The exposure of the Sunda Shelf created a land bridge, Sunderland, connecting mainland Asia to the islands of Sumatra, Borneo and Java, which facilitated animal and human migration. Similarly, the Sahul Shelf connected Australia and New Guinea, influencing the peopling of Australia. The human presence in Asia during the Ice Age was diverse and critically important for understanding global human dispersal. Early modern humans, Homo sapiens, migrated out of Africa into Asia in multiple waves, beginning roughly 70,000 to 60,000 years ago. They gradually spread across the continent, adapting to diverse environments. In East Asia, fossil evidence and archaeological sites demonstrate the long-term presence of modern humans. In Siberia, archaeological findings, such as those at the Yana River Rhino Horn site, dating back around 30,000 years ago, indicate that humans had adapted to life in the Arctic Circle, hunting woolly rhinos and other large game. These early Siberians developed specialized tools and hunting strategies for extreme cold environments. One of the most significant aspects of Ice Age Asia in human history is its role as the staging ground for the peopling of the Americas. As discussed, the Bering Land Bridge, Beringia, connected Northeast Asia with Alaska. Human populations, adapted to the Siberian cold and steppe environment, migrated across Beringia into North America, following migratory animal herds. This migration occurred over thousands of years, with some groups potentially residing in Beringia itself for extended periods before moving further south into the American continents. The genetic evidence from modern Native American populations strongly links their ancestry to East Asian populations, reinforcing the Beringian migration theory. Across Asia, early human cultures developed diverse technologies suited to their local environments. In the steppe regions, mobile hunter-gatherers focused on big game hunting, using spear throwers and later, bows and arrows. Their toolkits included blades, points and scrapers for processing animal carcasses and hides. In other areas, where forests or coastal resources were available, diets and tool technologies diversified. Evidence of complex social structures, ceremonial practices, and symbolic expression is also found throughout Ice Age Asia. For instance, early forms of personal ornamentation, such as beads made from shells or bone, appear at various sites. The end of the Ice Age brought significant changes to Asia. As temperatures rose and ice sheets melted, sea levels rose, submerging land bridges like Sunderland and Beringia, altering coastlines and creating island nations. The vast mammoth steppe began to disappear, replaced by forests or new types of grasslands, which contributed to the extinction of many of the large Ice Age animals. Human populations in Asia adapted to these post-glacial changes, shifting their subsistence strategies and eventually leading to the development of agriculture in various parts of the continent, such as the Fertile Crescent in West Asia and the rice-growing regions of East Asia. The Ice Age in Asia was not just a period of cold, it was a crucible for human adaptation, cultural innovation, and crucial migrations that shaped the demographic landscape of the entire globe. While the popular image of the Ice Age often features vast ice sheets and woolly mammoths, central to our understanding is that Africa, largely positioned within the tropics, was not covered by continental glaciers. Nevertheless, the last glacial period, spanning approximately 110,000 to 12,000 years ago, profoundly impacted Africa's climate, ecosystems, and the trajectory of human evolution and dispersal, as it was the birthplace of modern humans. Africa's direct experience with glaciation was limited to high-altitude mountain ranges. Peaks like Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Kenya, and the Ruwenzori Mountains in East Africa, as well as the Atlas Mountains in North Africa, supported mountain glaciers and small ice caps. These glaciers were more extensive during the colder glacial periods than they are today, but they were isolated features and did not form vast continental ice sheets like those in Europe or North America. Despite the absence of continental ice sheets, Africa experienced significant and widespread climatic changes. The dominant pattern was one of increased aridity, meaning drier conditions, particularly during the last glacial maximum, around 26,000 to 20,000 years ago. Lower global temperatures led to less evaporation from the oceans and reduced moisture transport, resulting in decreased rainfall across much of the continent. This aridity caused the expansion of deserts, most notably the Sahara and Kalahari, which became even larger and harsher than they are today, acting as significant barriers to human and animal movement. The rainforests of Central and West Africa also contracted, shrinking into smaller isolated patches, or refugia, where species could survive. These contractions of forests and expansions of deserts fragmented ecosystems, leading to periods of both isolation and renewed contact for human and animal populations. The reduction in rainfall had a dramatic impact on Africa's major lakes and river systems. Lake Victoria, for instance, experienced significantly lower water levels, sometimes shrinking into a series of smaller separate basins. Many smaller lakes and wetlands dried up entirely. River systems like the Nile would have experienced altered flow regimes with lower discharge. This hydrological stress put pressure on both plant and animal life, forcing populations to adapt or migrate in search of water and food. Conversely, some regions of Africa experienced slightly increased moisture during certain phases of the Ice Age, particularly at the beginning and end of glacial periods, or in specific geographic areas influenced by shifts in atmospheric circulation. However, the overarching trend for much of the continent during glacial maxima was cooler and drier. The presence of strong winds, similar to those in other periglacial zones, would have further contributed to desiccation and dust transport. These climatic shifts had profound effects on Africa's flora and fauna. As grasslands and savannas expanded in some areas at the expense of forests, animal populations adapted. Large grazing animals like wildebeest, zebras and antelopes would have thrived in these expanded grasslands, while forest-dwelling species faced habitat loss. The megafauna of Africa, such as elephants, rhinos, and hippos, though not woolly like their northern counterparts, were also affected by the changing availability of water and vegetation. Crucially, Africa was the cradle of modern human evolution, and its human populations were profoundly shaped by the Ice Age climate. Homo sapiens evolved in Africa and adapted to its dynamic environments long before migrating out of the continent. The periods of increased aridity and habitat fragmentation may have played a significant role in human evolution and dispersal within Africa, forcing populations into smaller, more isolated groups, which could have driven local adaptations and genetic diversification. When conditions improved, these groups could expand and reconnect, leading to gene flow and cultural exchange. The out-of-Africa migrations, which led to the global dispersal of Homo sapiens, were directly influenced by Ice Age climatic cycles. Periods of relatively wetter conditions, sometimes called green corridors, allowed human populations to move out of Africa into the Middle East and further into Asia. These corridors, often following coastal routes or river valleys, would have provided sufficient water and resources for migration across otherwise arid regions. The exact timing and routes of these dispersals are still debated, but it is clear they were tied to favourable climatic windows during the Ice Age. Within Africa, human populations developed sophisticated stone tool technologies, such as the Middle Stone Age industries, characterised by finely crafted points, scrapers, and blades. They developed diverse subsistence strategies, adapting to coastal, savanna, and forest environments, using resources like shellfish, fish, and a wide array of plant foods, alongside hunting terrestrial animals. Evidence of symbolic behaviour, such as personal ornamentation, beads made from ostrich eggshell, and early forms of art, indicates complex cognitive abilities and cultural practices. The Ice Age in Africa, therefore, was not about ice, but about water scarcity, shifting landscapes, and the environmental pressures that shaped the very development and global spread of modern humanity. It was a period of environmental challenge that spurred human innovation and adaptability. The last glacial maximum, often shortened to LGM, represents the coldest and most extensive period of glaciation during the most recent Ice Age. This intense phase occurred approximately 26,000 to 20,000 years ago, during which ice sheets reached their greatest extent, dramatically reshaping the Earth's surface and climate. Understanding the conditions of the LGM is crucial for comprehending the scale of past environmental changes and their impact on life. During the LGM, vast continental ice sheets dominated the Northern Hemisphere. In North America, the Laurentide ice sheet covered almost all of Canada and extended deep into the United States, reaching as far south as the Ohio River and Missouri River valleys. Its thickness was immense, estimated to be more than 2 miles in some central areas, such as over Hudson Bay. The weight of this ice depressed the Earth's crust by hundreds of feet, an effect that is still slowly reversing today as land continues to rise. In Europe, the Scandinavian ice sheet covered nearly all of Fennoscandia and the British Isles, extending into Central Europe. These ice sheets were not static. They flowed outwards under their own weight, grinding bedrock, transporting enormous quantities of sediment, and carving out distinctive glacial landforms such as drumlins, eskers, and the basins of the Great Lakes. Beyond these main ice sheets, mountain glaciers in ranges like the Alps, Himalayas, and Rockies also expanded significantly. The immense volume of water locked up in these ice sheets led to a dramatic drop in global sea levels. At the LGM's peak, sea levels were approximately 100 to 120 metres, or about 330 to 400 feet, lower than they are today. This exposed vast areas of continental shelves, creating land bridges that connected continents. The most notable example is Beringia, which linked Asia and North America, facilitating the migration of animals and early humans. Other land bridges, such as Sunderland in Southeast Asia and Doggerland in the North Sea, also emerged, altering global biogeography. Global temperatures during the LGM were significantly colder. The average global surface temperature was about 8 to 10 degrees Celsius, lower than present-day averages. This was not uniform across the planet. Cooling was more pronounced at higher latitudes near the ice sheets, but even tropical regions experienced cooler conditions. The cold was intensified by the high albedo of the extensive ice and snow cover, meaning a large amount of sunlight was reflected back into space, further reducing the Earth's absorption of solar radiation. The cold climate led to profound changes in vegetation. Forests largely retreated from higher latitudes and elevations, replaced by vast treeless environments. The dominant vegetation types were tundra and the Mammoth steppe, a highly productive cold grassland that stretched across much of Eurasia and Beringia. These cold grasslands supported the immense herds of Ice Age megafauna, including woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, and steppe bison. In areas adjacent to the ice sheets, periglacial conditions prevailed, characterized by permafrost, permanently frozen ground, which prevented deep root growth and led to unique ground features like patterned ground and pingos. Deserts also expanded in many parts of the world due to increased aridity. Atmospheric conditions were also extreme. The climate was generally much drier globally, as less moisture evaporated from the colder oceans, and atmospheric circulation patterns shifted. This led to reduced precipitation in many regions, causing lakes to shrink and deserts to expand. Strong, persistent winds were common, driven by the vast temperature gradients between the cold, ice-covered landmasses and the relatively warmer oceans. These winds transported vast amounts of fine sediment, known as loess, from glaciated and barren areas, depositing it over hundreds of miles to form fertile plains. For instance, the Loess plateaus of China and the fertile plains of central North America are legacies of these winds. The atmosphere also contained lower levels of greenhouse gases, particularly carbon dioxide and methane, which contributed to the colder temperatures through reduced greenhouse effect. Ice core records from Antarctica and Greenland provide direct evidence of these lower greenhouse gas concentrations during the LGM. The extreme conditions of the LGM exerted immense pressure on all forms of life. Animal populations adapted through thick fur, large body size, and migratory behaviours. Human populations, including early modern humans and Neanderthals, demonstrated remarkable resilience and ingenuity, developing specialised tools, hunting strategies, and shelters to survive the challenging environment. Their ability to thrive in such an extreme world highlights the adaptability of our species. The LGM was not just a cold snapshot in time. It was a dynamic period that shaped the Earth's physical geography, its ecosystems, and the very course of human history. Its severity underscores the powerful natural forces that drive long-term climate change on our planet. The Earth's climate is influenced by various factors, some of which operate over very long timescales, spanning tens or hundreds of thousands of years. Among the most significant of these are the natural cycles in Earth's orbit and tilt, collectively known as Milankovitch cycles. These cycles describe predictable long-term variations in how the Earth moves around the Sun, and they are widely accepted as the primary drivers of the glacial and interglacial periods within ice ages. It is not the wobble itself that directly causes ice ages, but rather how the wobble and other orbital changes affect the amount and distribution of sunlight reaching different parts of the Earth. There are three main Milankovitch cycles: eccentricity, obliquity, and precession. Each cycle has a different period and affects the Earth's climate in a distinct way by altering the amount of solar radiation, or insolation, received at different latitudes and seasons. First, eccentricity refers to the shape of Earth's orbit around the Sun. The orbit is not a perfect circle but an ellipse. The eccentricity cycle describes how elliptical this orbit becomes over time. This cycle has a period of approximately 100,000 years and a secondary period of 400,000 years. When the orbit is more eccentric, the Earth's distance from the Sun varies more significantly throughout the year. This means there is a greater difference in the amount of solar energy received at perihelion, when Earth is closest to the Sun, and aphelion, when Earth is furthest from the Sun. While the total amount of solar energy received by the Earth over an entire year changes only slightly due to eccentricity, it influences the length of the seasons and the intensity of solar radiation at different times of the year. For example, if Earth is at its closest point to the Sun during the Northern Hemisphere summer, that summer will be warmer. Second, obliquity, or the tilt of Earth's axis, describes the angle at which Earth's rotational axis is tilted with respect to its orbit around the Sun. This tilt is currently about 23.5 degrees, but it varies between 22.1 degrees and 24.5 degrees over a cycle of approximately 41,000 years. This tilt is responsible for Earth's seasons. When the tilt is greater, a higher obliquity, the seasonal differences become more extreme. Summers are warmer and winters are colder. When the tilt is smaller, a lower obliquity, seasons become milder. For the growth of ice sheets, mild summers are more critical than cold winters. If summers are not warm enough to melt the previous winter's snow and ice, then snow and ice can accumulate year after year, eventually forming glaciers. Therefore, lower obliquity, leading to milder summers at high latitudes, is generally associated with glacial growth. Third, precession refers to the wobble of Earth's axis, similar to the wobble of a spinning top. This wobble changes the direction of the Earth's axis relative to the stars. The precession cycle has two main components with periods of approximately 19,000 years and 23,000 years. Precession impacts the timing of the seasons relative to Earth's position in its elliptical orbit. For example, today, the Northern Hemisphere experiences summer when Earth is near aphelion, furthest from the Sun, resulting in relatively milder Northern Hemisphere summers. About 11,000 years ago, due to precession, Northern Hemisphere summer occurred when Earth was near perihelion, closest to the Sun, making those summers warmer. The combination of eccentricity and precession is often called the precession of the equinoxes, and it influences which hemisphere experiences its summer when the Earth is closest to the Sun. For ice sheet growth, cool Northern Hemisphere summers are essential, as this allows snow and ice to persist and accumulate. The combined effect of these three cycles dictates the amount of solar radiation received at different latitudes and seasons. While the total amount of solar energy reaching the entire Earth over a year does not change drastically, the distribution of this energy, particularly at high northern latitudes during summer, is crucial for initiating and ending glacial periods. The Northern Hemisphere is particularly important because it contains most of the Earth's landmass suitable for ice sheet formation. If high northern latitudes receive less solar energy during summer, previous winter's snow and ice are less likely to melt entirely. This allows snow to accumulate over successive years, compacting into ice and eventually forming massive glaciers. Once ice sheets begin to form, they contribute to further cooling through positive feedback loops. For example, the highly reflective surface of ice sheets, high albedo, reflects more sunlight back into space, reducing the absorption of solar energy and leading to further cooling and ice growth. The Milankovitch theory successfully explains the timing of past glacial and interglacial cycles, as evidenced by geological records, such as deep-sea sediment cores and ice cores, which provide proxy data for past climates. While other factors, such as volcanic activity, atmospheric greenhouse gas concentrations, and continental configurations also influence climate, the Milankovitch cycles are considered the fundamental pacemaker for the large-scale, long-term swings between glacial and interglacial conditions that define an ice age. They provide a predictable astronomical framework for understanding the Earth's long-term climate history and the cyclical nature of its icy past. The relationship between the Sun's energy and the Earth's ice sheets is a fundamental aspect of understanding Ice Age cycles. It is not that the Sun itself changes its energy output dramatically, but rather that the way Earth receives and distributes the Sun's energy varies in subtle yet crucial ways. These small changes, primarily driven by Earth's orbital cycles, Milankovitch cycles, have a profound impact on whether ice sheets grow or melt. The key lies in the amount of solar radiation, or insolation, that reaches specific parts of the Earth at particular times of the year, especially high northern latitudes during summer. The growth of an ice sheet requires a critical condition: that more snow falls in winter than melts in summer. If summer temperatures are consistently too warm, all the previous winter's snow will melt away, preventing any long-term accumulation. Conversely, if summers are cool enough that some snow and ice survive the melt season, then year after year this residual snow can accumulate, compact under its own weight, and eventually transform into glacial ice. This process is most effective at high latitudes, particularly in the northern hemisphere, where vast land masses provide a base for ice sheet formation. The amount of sunlight reaching high northern latitudes during summer is precisely what the Milankovitch cycles influence. Let's consider how each cycle plays a role in this. First, the eccentricity of Earth's orbit, or how elliptical it is, changes over cycles of about 100,000 years. While the total annual solar energy received by Earth changes only slightly, eccentricity affects the variation in solar radiation throughout the year. When the orbit is more elliptical, the difference between the Earth's closest approach to the Sun, perihelion, and furthest point, aphelion, is greater. If a hemisphere's summer occurs when Earth is closer to the Sun, that summer will be warmer. If it occurs when Earth is further from the Sun, that summer will be cooler. For ice sheet growth, a cooler summer at high northern latitudes is more beneficial because it reduces the amount of melt. Second, the obliquity, or the tilt of Earth's axis, cycles over approximately 41,000 years, varying between 22.1 degrees and 24.5 degrees. This tilt determines the intensity of the seasons. A greater tilt leads to more extreme seasons, hotter summers and colder winters. A smaller tilt leads to milder seasons, cooler summers and milder winters. For ice sheet accumulation, a smaller tilt is generally favourable. A smaller tilt means that high latitude areas receive less direct sunlight during their summer, leading to less intense summer warming and thus less melting of winter snow. This allows the snow to survive through the summer and contribute to the growth of glaciers. The cooler summer effect due to lower obliquity outweighs the colder winter effect in terms of ice accumulation. Third, precession, the wobble of Earth's axis, occurs in cycles of roughly 19,000 and 23,000 years. Precession affects the timing of the seasons relative to Earth's position in its elliptical orbit. For example, today, the northern hemisphere's summer occurs when Earth is near its furthest point from the Sun, aphelion. This makes northern hemisphere summers relatively mild. About 11,000 years ago, due to precession, northern hemisphere summer occurred when Earth was near its closest point to the Sun, perihelion, resulting in warmer summers. The critical factor for ice sheets is when high northern latitudes experience cool summers. If summer coincides with aphelion, furthest from the Sun, and the orbit is already eccentric, this creates particularly cool summers, favouring ice growth. The combination of these orbital factors dictates the insolation budget at high latitudes. When these cycles align in a way that produces minimal solar radiation during the northern hemisphere summer, it creates conditions favourable for snow and ice to persist year after year. This allows for the accumulation and eventual formation of massive ice sheets. Once ice sheets begin to form, they contribute to further cooling through positive feedback loops. The vast white surfaces of ice and snow have a high albedo, meaning they reflect a significant portion of incoming sunlight back into space. This reduces the amount of solar energy absorbed by the Earth, leading to further cooling and perpetuating ice growth. Additionally, the presence of large ice sheets can alter atmospheric and oceanic circulation patterns, further influencing regional climates. Conversely, when the orbital cycles align to deliver more intense solar radiation to high northern latitudes during summer, it leads to increased melting of existing ice sheets. If the melt rate exceeds the accumulation rate, the ice sheets begin to retreat. This retreat also creates a positive feedback loop. As ice melts, it exposes darker land or ocean surfaces, which absorb more solar energy, leading to further warming and more melting. These orbital variations explain the observed rhythm of glacial and interglacial periods over the past few million years, as recorded in ice cores and deep-sea sediments. The small, long-term changes in the way the Earth orbits and tilts relative to the Sun act as the primary external trigger for the dramatic swings between periods of widespread ice and warmer, ice-free conditions. The transition from the depths of the Ice Age, specifically the last glacial maximum, to the warmer conditions of the current interglacial period was not an instantaneous event. Instead, it began with subtle shifts in the Earth's climate system, detectable as the first hints of warming. These initial signs, though modest at first, marked the beginning of a profound transformation that would eventually melt vast ice sheets and reshape the planet's landscapes and ecosystems. The primary drivers for these initial warming trends were the changes in Earth's orbit and tilt, which altered the distribution of solar energy received at critical latitudes. One of the earliest and most direct indicators of warming was a gradual increase in average global temperatures. While the last glacial maximum saw temperatures roughly 8 to 10 degrees Celsius lower than today, the shift away from this extreme cold began slowly. Scientific reconstructions of past temperatures, derived from ice cores drilled in Greenland and Antarctica, show a rising trend in atmospheric temperatures starting around 20,000 years ago, or slightly earlier in some records. These ice cores provide a direct archive of past atmospheric conditions, including temperature proxies such as the ratios of oxygen isotopes in the ice. A shift towards higher ratios of certain oxygen isotopes indicates warmer temperatures. This rise in temperature was not uniform across the globe. Some regions experienced warming more rapidly or intensely than others, particularly at high latitudes where the influence of ice sheets was most direct. Another key warming sign was a change in the composition of the atmosphere, specifically an increase in greenhouse gas concentrations. Ice core data reveal that levels of carbon dioxide and methane, potent greenhouse gases, began to rise from their low glacial levels around the same time that global temperatures started to climb. During the last glacial maximum, carbon dioxide concentrations were around 180 parts per million, significantly lower than pre-industrial levels of about 280 parts per million. As the Earth began to warm, natural processes led to the release of these gases into the atmosphere. For instance, rising temperatures would have led to the warming of oceans, causing them to release dissolved carbon dioxide. Changes in ocean circulation patterns could also have played a role in releasing carbon from deep ocean reservoirs. The increase in methane is thought to be linked to the expansion of wetlands as ice melted, and new land became available for vegetation, or potentially from the decomposition of organic matter in thawing permafrost. The rise in greenhouse gas levels created a positive feedback loop. As the Earth warmed due to orbital changes, more greenhouse gases were released, which in turn amplified the warming trend. Changes in vegetation patterns also served as subtle warming signs. As temperatures slowly increased, particularly in periglacial zones and at the edges of the vast tundra and cold steppe biomes, cold-tolerant species began to retreat, and more temperate plants started to expand their ranges. Pollen analysis from lake sediments and peat bogs shows a gradual shift in species composition. For example, the dominance of tundra grasses and sedges began to wane in some areas, replaced by shrubs and eventually by pioneering tree species like birch and pine, which tolerate cooler conditions but require more warmth than tundra plants. This botanical transition was a slow, incremental process, but it indicated a fundamental shift in regional climates towards warmer, wetter conditions that could support more diverse and complex plant communities. Evidence from ocean sediments also provided early indicators of warming. Changes in the types of microfossils found in these sediments, such as the shells of tiny marine organisms, can reveal shifts in ocean temperatures and currents. As the North Atlantic, for instance, began to receive more meltwater from retreating glaciers, it could have influenced ocean circulation, potentially leading to some areas warming more quickly. Deep ocean currents, which play a crucial role in distributing heat around the globe, would have begun to adjust to the changing ice cover and freshwater input, contributing to a more widespread warming. Furthermore, the initial signs of ice retreat, though perhaps not immediately apparent to humans living at the time, were also a symptom of warming. As average summer temperatures subtly increased, less snow and ice survived the melt season at the edges of the vast ice sheets and mountain glaciers. This led to a very slow thinning and retreat of ice margins, which would eventually accelerate into a major meltdown. The initial stages of this retreat might have been marked by increased meltwater flowing from glacial fronts, forming proglacial lakes, or altering river courses near the ice margins. These early, almost imperceptible changes in ice mass balance were direct consequences of the subtle, but persistent, increase in solar radiation, reaching high northern latitudes due to orbital forcing, signalling the beginning of the end for the last glacial period's profound cold. The Earth was slowly but surely awakening from its deep chill. The end of the last glacial maximum, roughly starting around 19,000 years ago, was defined by the widespread and accelerating melting of the immense ice sheets and mountain glaciers that had covered vast portions of the Earth. This process, known as ice retreat or deglaciation, was a dynamic and transformative event that profoundly reshaped landscapes, created new hydrological systems, and set the stage for the modern world. The initial stages of this retreat were gradual, but as temperatures continued to rise, the melting gained momentum. The retreat of the massive continental ice sheets, such as the Laurentide ice sheet in North America and the Scandinavian ice sheet in Europe, was a primary feature of deglaciation. As global temperatures increased due to orbital forcing and rising greenhouse gas concentrations, the balance between snow accumulation and ice melt shifted. Summers became warm enough that they melted more snow and ice than accumulated during the preceding winters. This led to a net loss of ice mass. The ice sheets did not simply melt in place, rather, their margins pulled back. This retreat was often punctuated by periods of re-advance during temporary cold snaps, but the overall trend was one of shrinking ice cover. As the ice sheets retreated, they left behind a dramatically altered landscape. The immense weight of the ice had scoured bedrock, creating broad valleys, cirques, and fjords. As the ice melted, it released vast amounts of rock and sediment that had been incorporated into the ice. These materials were deposited in various forms: moraines, which are ridges of till, unsorted glacial sediment, marking the former extent of the ice, drumlins, elongated hills shaped by glacial flow, and outwash plains, vast areas of sand and gravel deposited by meltwater streams flowing away from the ice front. The sheer volume of this deposited material completely changed the topography of regions previously covered by ice. One of the most significant consequences of ice retreat was the formation of new lakes. As the ice sheets melted, immense quantities of meltwater accumulated in depressions carved by the glaciers or against ice dams. These proglacial lakes were often vast in size, dwarfing many modern lakes. A prime example is Glacial Lake Agassiz, which covered parts of present-day Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and North Dakota. At its largest, Lake Agassiz was larger than all of the North American Great Lakes combined. These lakes acted as temporary reservoirs for meltwater, and their sudden draining events, caused by the collapse of ice dams or the opening of new outlets, could lead to catastrophic floods. The retreat of ice also fundamentally altered river systems. Pre-glacial river networks were often disrupted by the advancing ice. As the ice melted, new drainage patterns emerged. Meltwater rivers, often braided and heavily laden with sediment, flowed away from the ice fronts, carving new channels and depositing vast alluvial plains. Many modern river systems in formerly glaciated regions have their origins in these meltwater channels. For example, the Mississippi River system was heavily influenced by glacial meltwater, carrying sediment from the retreating Laurentide ice sheet southwards. The sheer volume of water released by melting ice sometimes led to dramatic changes in river flow and direction, establishing the hydrological networks we see today. The process of deglaciation was not always smooth or linear. There were periods of abrupt climatic reversals, such as the Younger Dryas Cold period, which occurred around 12,900 to 11,700 years ago. During this 1,000-year interval, temperatures in the northern hemisphere suddenly plunged back to near glacial levels, and glaciers briefly re-advanced. This reversal temporarily halted or even reversed the ice retreat in many regions, demonstrating the complex and sometimes rapid fluctuations of the climate system during this transitional period. However, after the Younger Dryas, the warming trend resumed with renewed vigour, leading to the final rapid melting of the remaining large ice sheets. The scale of the ice retreat was immense. In North America, the Laurentide ice sheet completely disappeared within a few thousand years after the last glacial maximum, shrinking to a fraction of its size by 10,000 years ago and largely gone by 7,000 years ago. In Europe, the Scandinavian ice sheet also vanished, leaving behind the distinctive landscapes of Scandinavia and the British Isles. The melting of mountain glaciers around the world also contributed to rising sea levels and altered mountain environments. The retreat of ice was a powerful geological force, not only contributing to global sea level rise but also leaving behind the fertile soils, abundant lakes, and reorganized river systems that characterize much of the modern temperate world, directly impacting where humans could settle and how they could live. One of the most profound and direct consequences of the melting of continental ice sheets and mountain glaciers at the end of the Ice Age was a dramatic rise in global sea levels. This phenomenon transformed coastlines worldwide, submerged vast areas of previously exposed land, and profoundly impacted early human populations and ecosystems. The scale of this sea level rise was immense, far exceeding anything observed in recent history, and it reshaped the very geography of the planet. During the last glacial maximum, approximately 26,000 to 20,000 years ago, the Earth's oceans were significantly lower than they are today. Estimates indicate that global sea levels were about 100 to 120 metres, or roughly 330 to 400 feet below present levels. This enormous drop in sea level was directly due to the vast quantities of water locked up in the continental ice sheets covering North America and Europe, as well as expanded mountain glaciers. If all of Earth's ice melted today, sea levels would rise by about 66 metres, or 216 feet, highlighting the scale of water previously stored as ice. As the Earth began to warm from around 19,000 years ago, the vast ice sheets started to melt. This meltwater flowed from the continents into the oceans, causing global sea levels to rise. This process was not steady. It occurred in pulses, sometimes very rapidly, corresponding to periods of accelerated ice sheet decay. For example, there were several meltwater pulses, such as Meltwater Pulse 1A, which occurred around 14,500 years ago. During this period, global sea levels are estimated to have risen by as much as 20 metres, or about 65 feet, in only 500 years or less, a rate far exceeding current observations. Such rapid rises would have been perceptible even within a human lifetime. The most immediate and visible effect of rising sea levels was the inundation of coastal plains and continental shelves. During the Ice Age, the relatively gently sloping continental shelves were exposed as dry land, extending coastlines far beyond their present positions. These exposed shelves were often rich in resources, supporting unique ecosystems and providing valuable territory for animals and humans. As sea levels rose, these low-lying areas were progressively submerged. This meant that vast hunting grounds, fertile plains, and coastal settlements used by early humans were lost to the encroaching sea. Archaeological sites that existed on these now submerged shelves are incredibly difficult to study, but evidence suggests significant human presence in these areas during glacial times. The rising seas transformed continental connections. Land bridges that had facilitated the migration of animals and humans between continents were submerged. The Bering Land Bridge, which connected Asia and North America, was gradually inundated as sea levels rose, closing this vital migratory pathway by about 11,000 years ago. Similarly, Sunderland, which linked mainland Southeast Asia to its major islands, disappeared beneath the waves, isolating populations on newly formed islands. Doggerland, the land bridge that connected Great Britain to continental Europe, was also submerged, creating the English Channel and separating the British Isles. These submergence events altered species distribution and isolated human cultures. The impact of rising sea levels on human populations was profound. Coastal communities, which often relied on rich marine and estuarine resources, would have been forced to repeatedly relocate inland as the shoreline advanced. This constant displacement would have presented significant challenges to establish social structures and subsistence strategies. While the retreat of ice inland opened up new land, the loss of productive coastal zones was a major environmental change that required human adaptation. Beyond direct inundation, rising sea levels also impacted coastal ecosystems. Estuaries, important breeding grounds for many marine species, would have shifted inland. Saline water intruded into freshwater aquifers near the coast, affecting water supplies for human and animal consumption. The overall effect was a complete restructuring of coastal environments and the resources they provided. The scale of sea level rise at the end of the Ice Age was a testament to the immense volume of water held in the ice sheets. The transition from a low stand sea level to near present-day levels took place over approximately 12,000 to 15,000 years, averaging about 1 metre, 3 feet per century, but with significant variations and periods of much faster rise. This natural process provides a historical context for understanding the potential impacts of future sea level rise, emphasising the dynamic nature of Earth's climate system and the profound ways in which changes in ice volume can reshape the planet's geography. The retreat of the vast Ice Age glaciers was not always a smooth, gradual process of melting. In many regions, the melting ice created immense bodies of water that were temporarily held back by natural ice dams. When these colossal ice dams failed, they unleashed some of the largest freshwater floods ever known, reshaping landscapes in a matter of days or weeks. These great floods were catastrophic events, powerful enough to carve canyons, move enormous boulders, and dramatically alter river systems. The most famous and thoroughly studied examples are the Missoula floods, which repeatedly swept across parts of North America. The Missoula floods occurred between approximately 15,000 and 13,000 years ago in what is now the northwestern United States. The primary source of these floods was Glacial Lake Missoula, an enormous proglacial lake formed by meltwater from the Cordilleran ice sheet. This lake was located in present-day western Montana. The flathead lobe of the Cordilleran ice sheet advanced southward, forming an ice dam across the Clark Fork River Valley. This dam, estimated to be more than 2,000 feet high and tens of miles wide, blocked the natural drainage of the river, causing water to back up and form Glacial Lake Missoula. At its maximum extent, the lake held an estimated 500 cubic miles of water, which is about half the volume of Lake Michigan, and covered an area of about 3,000 square miles, reaching depths of over 2,000 feet. The ice dam holding back Glacial Lake Missoula was not permanently stable. The immense pressure of the lake water, combined with processes like hydrofracturing, where water seeps into cracks in the ice and freezes, expanding the cracks, eventually caused the ice dam to fail catastrophically. When the dam broke, the lake emptied in a matter of days. The unleashed water, moving at speeds of up to 60 miles per hour, rushed across eastern Washington, down the Columbia River Gorge, and into the Pacific Ocean. The peak discharge of these floods is estimated to have been 10 times the flow of all the rivers in the world combined, or about 10 times the flow of the Amazon River. The immense force of this water carved out the distinctive channeled scablands of eastern Washington. The channeled scablands are a unique geological feature characterized by deep braided canyons, coulees, dry waterfalls, and enormous ripple marks, giant current ripples, up to 50 feet high and several hundred feet apart. These features were formed by the erosive power of the floodwaters, which stripped away vast amounts of topsoil and bedrock, exposing the underlying basalt. The floods also left behind massive erratics, boulders transported hundreds of miles from their origin and deposited far from their source, clear evidence of the water's immense carrying capacity. The Missoula floods were not a single event. Geological evidence indicates that the ice dam reformed and broke repeatedly, perhaps more than 100 times, over a period of about 2,500 years. Each flood event scoured the landscape further, deepening the channels and depositing new sediments. The recurrence of these floods suggests a cyclical process where the ice dam would build, the lake would fill, the dam would fail, and then the ice sheet would re-advance to reform the dam. Similar catastrophic floods, though perhaps not on the same scale as the Missoula floods, occurred in other glaciated regions. In North America, the draining of the other proglacial lakes also caused significant flood events. For example, the melting of the Laurentide ice sheet led to the formation of Glacial Lake Agassiz, which was even larger than Lake Missoula, covering parts of present-day Canada and the United States. While Lake Agassiz did not drain in a single catastrophic event like Missoula, its draining occurred in a series of massive pulses as ice dams failed or new outlets were established. These floods contributed enormous volumes of fresh water to the Atlantic Ocean, potentially impacting ocean circulation patterns. In Eurasia, the melting of the Scandinavian ice sheet and other ice masses also led to large-scale flood events. For instance, the formation and draining of proglacial lakes in Siberia and Eastern Europe significantly altered regional hydrology. The breaking of ice dams could have unleashed torrents that carved out new river valleys or deepened existing ones. While specific sites comparable to the Missoula Scablands are less documented globally, the geological principle of ice-dammed lake outbursts is well established wherever large glaciers interacted with topography that could trap meltwater. The study of these great floods provides crucial insights into the power of meltwater and the dynamic nature of deglaciation. They demonstrate that the end of the Ice Age was not solely a story of gradual melting, but also involved episodic, high-energy events that dramatically and rapidly transformed the Earth's surface. These floods shaped the landscapes we see today, influencing the courses of rivers, the distribution of sediments, and the very topography of formerly glaciated regions. Their scale underscores the immense forces at play as the Ice Age gave way to warmer conditions. As the Ice Age drew to a close, the Earth's crust experienced significant shifts due to the removal of vast ice loads. This period of dramatic environmental change might also have been influenced by increased volcanic activity. The idea that volcanic eruptions during deglaciation could have affected climate or reshaped landscapes is a subject of scientific inquiry, exploring the complex interplay between geological processes and climate change. One key mechanism linking glacial retreat and volcanic activity is what is known as isostatic rebound, or glacial isostatic adjustment. During the last glacial maximum, the immense weight of continental ice sheets, sometimes miles thick, pressed down on the Earth's crust, causing it to deform and sink into the mantle below. This is similar to how a heavy object placed on a soft surface will create a depression. As the ice sheets melted and their immense weight was removed, the crust began to slowly rebound or rise back up, a process that continues today in formerly glaciated regions like Scandinavia and parts of North America. This rebound can occur at rates of several millimeters per year. The removal of the ice load and the subsequent crustal rebound can reduce the stress on the Earth's crust in certain areas. This change in stress can potentially influence existing fault lines and magma chambers, making it easier for magma to rise to the surface and for eruptions to occur. Essentially, unloading the crust might reduce the confining pressure on underlying magma, promoting decompression melting or allowing magma to ascend more readily through pre-existing weaknesses in the crust. Studies have shown a correlation between periods of rapid deglaciation and increased volcanic activity in regions that were heavily glaciated. For example, some research suggests that volcanic activity in Iceland, which was covered by a substantial ice cap during the Ice Age, increased significantly as the ice retreated. Similarly, there is evidence linking deglaciation to volcanic activity in parts of North America and Antarctica. The impact of these volcanic eruptions on the climate at the end of the Ice Age is complex. Large volcanic eruptions can release vast quantities of gases and fine particles known as aerosols into the atmosphere. Sulfur dioxide, a common volcanic gas, reacts in the atmosphere to form sulfate aerosols, which reflect sunlight back into space. This reflective effect can lead to a temporary cooling of the Earth's surface. Ash particles can also block sunlight, contributing to short-term cooling. If there was indeed an increase in volcanic activity during deglaciation, these eruptions could have had localized or even regional cooling effects, potentially influencing the pace of warming or contributing to climate reversals. However, the timing and scale of these volcanic effects are crucial. While individual large eruptions can cause short-term climate perturbations, it is less clear if increased volcanic activity during deglaciation was substantial enough or sustained enough to significantly alter the overall long-term warming trend driven by orbital changes and greenhouse gas increases. Some researchers propose that volcanic aerosols could have contributed to specific cold events during the deglaciation period, such as the Younger Dryas. For instance, if a series of large eruptions occurred around that time, their cumulative cooling effect might have amplified other factors, leading to the brief return to glacial conditions. However, the primary cause of the Younger Dryas is widely attributed to changes in ocean circulation due to large freshwater influxes from melting ice, rather than volcanic activity alone. Beyond climate, volcanic activity also directly reshaped landscapes. volcanic eruptions create new landforms, including volcanoes themselves, lava flows, and ash deposits. The interaction of erupting volcanoes with retreating glaciers could lead to unique geological features. For example, subglacial eruptions can melt large amounts of ice, leading to sudden floods known as lopes, which are powerful bursts of water from beneath a glacier. The eruption of certain volcanoes that had been dormant under glacial pressure could have led to new mountains or plains of volcanic rock. The ash and lava flows would have covered existing Ice Age landscapes, burying forests or diverting rivers, creating new ecological niches and altering the paths of animal migration. Detecting evidence of increased volcanism linked to deglaciation requires careful analysis of geological records, such as ash layers in ice cores and sediment cores, and dating of volcanic rocks. While the direct causal link between deglaciation and specific increases in volcanic activity is still an area of active research, the physical mechanisms suggest a plausible connection. The removal of the immense weight of the ice sheets provided a mechanism for changes in crustal stress, potentially facilitating magma movement and eruptions. Therefore, as the Ice Age ended, Earth's internal forces may have also played a role in shaping a changing world, adding another layer of complexity to the climate transition. The idea that a cosmic impact, such as a comet or asteroid hitting the Earth, might have contributed to the end of the Ice Age or caused specific sudden climate events during that period is a scientific hypothesis that has gained attention and debate. While such impacts are rare, their potential to cause rapid and widespread environmental changes is significant, and researchers have explored if an extraterrestrial event played a role in the dramatic shifts observed at the close of the last glacial period. The most prominent hypothesis linking a cosmic impact to the end of the Ice Age is the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. The Younger Dryas was a sharp and relatively brief return to near-glacial conditions in the Northern Hemisphere, occurring about 12,900 years ago and lasting for approximately 1,200 years before warming resumed. This sudden cold snap interrupted the general warming trend that was bringing the Ice Age to a close. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis proposes that a comet or asteroid fragmented and impacted the Earth, or exploded in the atmosphere, causing widespread environmental devastation and triggering this cold period. Proponents of this hypothesis point to several lines of evidence that they interpret as indicators of such an event. One key piece of evidence is the discovery of what are called impact markers in geological layers dating to the start of the Younger Dryas. These markers include nanodiamonds, tiny diamonds formed under extreme pressure and temperature, magnetic spherules, small round particles that form from molten rock droplets, charcoal, soot, and elevated levels of platinum and iridium, elements that are rare on Earth's surface but common in extraterrestrial objects. These materials are found in a specific layer of sediment, sometimes referred to as the Younger Dryas boundary layer, across various sites in North America, Europe, and parts of the Middle East. The argument is that the widespread distribution of these markers, often associated with a black matte layer rich in organic material, points to a large-scale event, such as an airburst or ground impact. The proposed immediate effects of such an impact or airburst would have been catastrophic. A significant airburst, similar to or larger than the Tunguska event of 1908, but on a continental scale, or multiple ground impacts, could have ignited widespread wildfires across North America. These fires would have produced massive amounts of soot and dust, which would have been injected into the atmosphere. The resulting atmospheric veil would have blocked sunlight, leading to an impact winter and a sudden drop in temperatures. This rapid cooling could have triggered the Younger Dryas cold period by disrupting atmospheric circulation patterns and potentially affecting ocean currents, such as the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, which plays a crucial role in distributing heat to the North Atlantic. Furthermore, the hypothesis suggests that the impact could have destabilized the Laurentide ice sheet, leading to a sudden release of meltwater into the North Atlantic. This influx of fresh water could have shut down the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, a mechanism widely accepted as a primary cause of the Younger Dryas cold event. The sudden influx of fresh cold water would have reduced the density of surface waters, preventing them from sinking and thus disrupting the warm currents that flow northward. However, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis remains highly controversial within the scientific community. Many scientists acknowledge the reality of the Younger Dryas cold event, but dispute the evidence for a cosmic impact as its cause. Critics argue that many of the proposed impact markers are not unique to impacts and can be formed by other natural processes such as wildfires or volcanic activity. They also point to inconsistencies in the dating of some sites and the lack of a clear impact crater of the appropriate age and size. Alternative explanations for the Younger Dryas, primarily involving changes in ocean circulation due to freshwater input from melting ice sheets, e.g. the draining of Glacial Lake Agassiz, are well supported by climate modelling and geological evidence and do not require an extraterrestrial trigger. While the debate continues, the exploration of the comet impact hypothesis highlights the potential for sudden extraterrestrial events to significantly influence Earth's climate and landscapes. Such an event, if it occurred, would not have directly ended the Ice Age in its entirety, as the overall warming trend was driven by orbital changes. However, it could have caused a severe temporary reversal in that warming trend, profoundly impacting the lives of Ice Age megafauna and early human populations. The rigorous scientific investigation of such hypotheses pushes the boundaries of our understanding of Earth's complex past and the numerous factors that can drive climate change. The Younger Dryas was a sharp and unexpected return to very cold, almost glacial conditions that interrupted the general warming trend at the end of the last ice age. This period of abrupt cooling occurred approximately 12,900 years ago and lasted for about 1,200 years before a rapid warming resumed and ushered in the current warm interglacial period. The Younger Dryas is a crucial event in understanding past climate change because it demonstrates how quickly Earth's climate system can shift, even when the overall trend is toward warming. Before the Younger Dryas, the Earth had been warming steadily for several thousand years after the last glacial maximum. Large ice sheets were melting, sea levels were rising, and vegetation zones were shifting. This warming phase, known as the Bulling-Allerud interstadial, saw relatively mild conditions, particularly in the northern hemisphere. Then, suddenly, temperatures in regions like the North Atlantic plunged, approaching conditions similar to those of the last glacial maximum. Ice core records from Greenland show a drop in average annual temperatures by as much as 10 to 15 degrees Celsius over just a few decades. This rapid cooling had widespread impacts, causing glaciers to re-advance in some areas, vegetation to shift back to cold-tolerant species, and sea ice to expand in the North Atlantic. The most widely accepted explanation for the Younger Dryas is a major disruption to the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, often called the AMOC, or Ocean Conveyor Belt. The AMOC is a large system of ocean currents that transports warm, salty water from the tropics northward into the North Atlantic. As this warm water reaches higher latitudes, it cools, becomes denser, and sinks, pulling more warm water from the south. This process is crucial for moderating the climate of Western Europe and parts of North America, making them significantly warmer than other regions at similar latitudes. During the deglaciation process preceding the Younger Dryas, immense proglacial lakes formed from melting ice sheets. One of the largest of these was Glacial Lake Agassiz, located in central North America, which held a vast volume of fresh water. Geological evidence suggests that around 12,900 years ago, a major outlet for Lake Agassiz, possibly through the Great Lakes system and the St. Lawrence River, opened or became active, releasing an enormous surge of cold, fresh water into the North Atlantic Ocean. This massive influx of fresh water would have significantly reduced the salinity of the surface waters in the North Atlantic. Fresh water is less dense than salty water. Therefore, the less dense, fresh surface water would not have sunk as effectively as the normally salty cold water. This disruption would have slowed down or even temporarily shut down the AMOC, effectively turning off the heat pump that brings warmth to the North Atlantic region. Without the northward transport of warm water from the AMOC, the North Atlantic and surrounding continents experienced a rapid return to glacial conditions. Sea ice expanded, reflecting more sunlight and further cooling the region. This regional cooling effect was so strong that it had ripple effects globally, influencing atmospheric circulation patterns and leading to drier conditions in some parts of the tropics and shifts in monsoon systems. Evidence for this oceanic shutdown comes from marine sediment cores, which show changes in the types of microorganisms that thrive in warm versus cold waters, as well as shifts in sediment composition indicating altered ocean currents. While the freshwater outburst hypothesis is the leading explanation, other contributing factors or alternative hypotheses have been proposed. One alternative, though less widely accepted, is the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which suggests a cosmic impact such as a comet airburst initiated the cooling. As discussed previously, proponents cite evidence of impact markers, widespread wildfires, and sudden climate shifts. However, many scientists argue that the evidence for such an impact is not conclusive and that the freshwater outburst mechanism provides a more robust explanation for the observed changes. The Younger Dryas event highlights the sensitivity of Earth's climate system to rapid changes, especially in critical components like ocean circulation. It demonstrates that the end of an ice age is not always a linear warming process but can involve dramatic fluctuations. The lessons from the Younger Dryas are important for understanding potential future climate shifts. It shows that even with overall warming, localized or global abrupt changes can occur if critical thresholds in Earth systems are crossed, such as a massive influx of fresh water from melting ice sheets affecting ocean currents. This ancient event serves as a powerful reminder of the complex and sometimes unpredictable nature of our planet's climate. The end of the last ice age, roughly between 12,000 and 10,000 years ago, was marked by a profound ecological event, the widespread extinction of many large animal species, collectively known as megafauna. This megafauna loss affected continents differently, but was particularly severe in North and South America, and to a lesser extent in parts of Eurasia. Understanding when and how these extinctions occurred is a central question in paleontology and archaeology, with scientists investigating a combination of factors. Megafauna refers to large animals, typically those weighing over 100 pounds. The Ice Age was characterized by an abundance of such giants. In North America, species like woolly mammoths, mastodons, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, giant ground sloths, short-faced bears, and American camels all disappeared. In South America, a diverse array of megafauna, including various ground sloths, gomphotheres, elephant-like creatures, and toxodons, rhinoceros-like animals, also vanished. Eurasia saw the extinction of woolly rhinos, cave bears, and cave lions, though some megafauna, like reindeer and bison, survived. Africa and parts of South Asia experienced fewer megafauna extinctions, with many large animals like elephants and rhinoceroses persisting into the modern era. The timing of these extinctions is crucial. In North and South America, the extinctions appear to have occurred very rapidly, largely coinciding with the end of the Younger Dryas and the widespread arrival of early modern humans. Most North American megafauna were gone by about 10,000 years ago. In Eurasia, the extinctions were more staggered, with some species disappearing earlier and others later. The speed and pattern of these extinctions point to significant environmental or human pressures. Scientists have proposed several main hypotheses to explain the megafauna loss, often emphasizing one primary cause, but many researchers now believe it was likely a combination of factors. The two leading hypotheses are climate change and human impact, specifically overhunting. The climate change hypothesis suggests that the rapid warming and associated environmental shifts at the end of the Ice Age were the primary drivers of extinction. As the ice sheets melted, landscapes transformed. The vast productive Mammoth steppe, a cold grassland that supported many large grazers, began to disappear, replaced by dense forests in some areas or new types of wetlands and shrublands. This change in vegetation would have reduced the available food for specialized grazers like mammoths and woolly rhinos. Furthermore, the rapid warming led to increased seasonality, with more distinct summers and winters, which some animals might have struggled to adapt to. The melting ice also caused massive floods and rising sea levels, altering habitats and potentially isolating populations. New diseases brought by rapidly expanding animal populations or even by humans could have also spread rapidly through stressed megafauna populations. The argument here is that many of these large animals, adapted to specific cold, open environments, simply could not cope with the speed and scale of these habitat changes. The human impact hypothesis, often called the overkill hypothesis, proposes that early modern humans were the primary cause of the extinctions, particularly in continents like the Americas where humans were a new and highly efficient predator. When humans first arrived in the Americas, around 15,000 to 14,500 years ago, They encountered large, naive animal populations that had no prior experience with such skilled and cooperative hunters. These animals might not have developed effective anti-predator behaviors against humans. Humans, armed with advanced stone tools and effective hunting strategies, including projectile weapons like spears and later bows and arrows, were capable of hunting even the largest and most dangerous animals. The rapid spread of humans across the Americas, coinciding closely with the timing of megafauna extinctions, is a key piece of evidence supporting this view. The hypothesis suggests that human hunting pressure, perhaps exacerbated by a blitzkrieg effect, where hunters moved quickly through pristine environments, led to population declines that the slow reproducing megafauna could not recover from. The fact that Africa and parts of Asia, where megafauna had co-evolved with humans for much longer, experienced fewer extinctions supports the idea that prolonged exposure to human hunting pressure might have allowed African megafauna to develop better survival strategies. A third view, increasingly favoured by scientists, is the combined impact hypothesis. This perspective suggests that neither climate change nor human hunting alone was sufficient to cause such widespread extinctions, but rather a synergistic combination of both factors. Rapid climate change stressed megafauna populations, making them more vulnerable. It fragmented their habitats, reduced their food sources, and potentially increased disease susceptibility. Against this backdrop of environmental stress, even moderate hunting pressure from a new, highly effective predator could have been enough to push already struggling populations past a critical threshold, leading to their collapse. For example, a warming climate might shrink the range of a species, concentrating them in smaller areas where they become easier targets for human hunters. The extinction of the megafauna was a transformative event, fundamentally altering global ecosystems. The loss of these large grazers and browsers would have changed vegetation structure, nutrient cycling, and predator-prey dynamics. Understanding the causes of this ancient extinction event provides valuable lessons for modern conservation efforts and highlights the complex interplay between climate, ecosystems, and human activity in shaping the Earth's biodiversity. Climate played a profound and multifaceted role in the widespread extinction of megafauna at the end of the Ice Age. While human impact is a significant factor in many extinction theories, rapid and dramatic changes in climate are undeniably a major component of the scientific explanation, either as a primary driver or as a critical stressor that made large animals more vulnerable. The speed and scale of these climatic shifts presented challenges that many megafauna species, adapted to specific Ice Age conditions, could not overcome. One of the most direct climate-related impacts was the loss and fragmentation of habitat. During the last glacial maximum, vast areas of the northern hemisphere were covered by the unique Mammoth steppe, or cold grassland biome. This highly productive ecosystem, dominated by grasses, sedges and herbs, provided abundant food for mega-grazers like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, and steppe bison. As the Earth warmed and the ice sheets melted, this vast steppe biome began to disappear. In many regions, it was replaced by new environments. Dense forests expanded northward into formerly open areas, wetlands developed from meltwater, and in some regions aridity increased, leading to desert expansion. Animals adapted to open, cold grasslands, particularly those that specialized in grazing, found their preferred habitat shrinking and becoming fragmented into smaller, isolated patches. This made it difficult for them to find enough food, especially during seasonal migrations, and could have led to inbreeding within isolated populations. The rapidity of climate change itself was a significant stressor. The warming at the end of the Ice Age was not a smooth, gradual process over thousands of years. Instead, it was punctuated by abrupt warming events, such as the Berling-Allerud interstadial and sudden cold reversals like the Younger Dryas. These rapid shifts, sometimes occurring over decades or centuries, would have made it extremely difficult for large, slow-reproducing animals to adapt through evolutionary processes. Species that were highly specialized to a stable cold climate found themselves in an environment that was changing faster than they could evolve. The shift from cold, dry conditions to warmer, wetter ones, and then back to cold would have caused continuous environmental instability. Changes in food availability and quality were directly linked to climate. As the Mammoth steppe vanished, the specific types of grasses and forbs that mega-grazers relied on were replaced by less palatable or less nutritious vegetation. Forests, for example, do not offer the same extensive grazing opportunities as open grasslands. This change in diet could have led to nutritional stress, weakening animals and making them more susceptible to disease or predation. For browsers like mastodons, changes in forest composition or distribution could have reduced their food sources. Increased environmental stress and susceptibility to disease are also critical aspects of the climate's role. Stressed populations facing habitat loss and reduced food would have had weaker immune systems. Rapid changes in temperature and humidity could also favour the spread of new pathogens or parasites, to which the megafauna had no prior immunity. As animal populations were forced into smaller, more crowded refugia due to habitat fragmentation, the risk of disease transmission would have increased significantly. Finally, sea level rise and massive floods also played a role. As ice melted, global sea levels rose dramatically, inundating vast coastal plains that had previously been valuable grazing grounds or migratory corridors. Catastrophic floods, such as the Missoula floods caused by the bursting of ice dams, scoured landscapes, destroyed vegetation, and could have directly killed large numbers of animals or fragmented their populations. These hydrological changes further altered habitats and limited movement. While the overkill hypothesis emphasizes human hunting, the climate role hypothesis underscores that megafauna populations were already under immense environmental pressure before, or simultaneously with, the arrival of human hunters. The argument is that climate change created a vulnerable population, making them more susceptible to even moderate hunting pressure. Conversely, human activities might have exacerbated climate-induced stress, for instance, by fragmenting habitats further through fire use or by disrupting animal migration routes. Ultimately, the end of the Ice Age was a period of unprecedented environmental upheaval, and the interplay between these profound climate shifts and the emerging human presence created a perfect storm that led to the dramatic and widespread disappearance of the megafauna. The theory that human hunting played a significant, and in some cases primary role in the extinction of Ice Age megafauna is known as the overkill hypothesis. This idea proposes that as human populations grew and spread across continents, their hunting pressure became unsustainable for large animal species, leading to their decline and ultimate disappearance. This hypothesis is particularly emphasized for continents where humans were relatively new arrivals, such as North and South America. The core of the overkill hypothesis rests on several key observations and assumptions. First, it notes the strong correlation in time between the arrival and rapid spread of early modern humans across continents and the swift disappearance of megafauna. In North America, for instance, the vast majority of the large mammal extinctions occurred within a relatively narrow window of about 1,000 to 2,000 years, roughly coinciding with the widespread establishment of the Clovis culture, around 13,500 to 12,800 years ago. This rapid extinction event, often termed a blitzkrieg, suggests a potent new factor entered the ecosystem. Second, the hypothesis points to the vulnerability of megafauna that had not co-evolved with human hunters. In Africa and parts of Eurasia, where large animals had lived alongside human ancestors for hundreds of thousands, or even millions of years, they had developed defensive behaviours against human predation. They might have learned to avoid humans, or their populations were already adapted to a certain level of human hunting pressure. In contrast, when humans arrived in the Americas, they encountered large animals like mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, and American horses that had no inherited fear or behavioural adaptations to this new, highly intelligent and technologically advanced predator. These naive populations would have been easier to hunt, making them particularly susceptible to overexploitation. Third, the effectiveness of early human hunting technology is considered. While early Stone Age tools might seem simple, they were highly effective when wielded by skilled and cooperative hunters. The development of projectile weapons such as spears propelled by atlatls, spear throwers, allowed hunters to kill large animals from a safer distance, increasing hunting success rates. The use of fire to drive animals, the ability to set traps, and the organisation of communal hunts, e.g. driving herds off cliffs or into natural traps, further enhanced their efficiency. Archaeological sites provide direct evidence of megafauna butchering, with stone tools found alongside the bones of mammoths mastodons, and bison. The sheer caloric return from a single large animal would have been immense, making megafauna a highly attractive target for hunter-gatherer groups. Fourth, the reproductive rates of megafauna are a critical factor. Large animals typically have long gestation periods, give birth to few offspring, and have long maturation times. This means their populations grow very slowly. If hunting pressure exceeds the rate at which new individuals are born and mature, even a seemingly small number of kills can lead to a rapid population decline from which the species cannot recover. This slow reproductive rate makes them inherently more vulnerable to overhunting compared to smaller, faster reproducing animals. The overkill hypothesis is supported by several patterns observed in the fossil record. For example, the disproportionate extinction of larger-bodied animals compared to smaller ones, and the greater severity of extinctions on continents colonized later by humans, like the Americas and Australia, compared to Africa, where humans originated, are often cited as evidence. In Australia, the arrival of humans around 65,000 years ago coincided with the extinction of its unique megafauna, including giant kangaroos and marsupial lions, further supporting the human impact argument. However, the overkill hypothesis is not without its critics, and it is rarely seen as the sole explanation. Many scientists advocate for a two-punch or combined impact model, where human hunting acted in concert with significant climate change. In this view, rapid climate shifts at the end of the Ice Age, e.g. habitat loss, increased aridity, changes in vegetation, and the Younger Dryas cold snap, weakened megafauna populations, making them more susceptible to human predation. Climate change might have fragmented habitats, concentrating animals in smaller areas where they were easier targets, or stressed them nutritionally, making them less resilient. The exact contribution of each factor likely varied by region and by species. For example, some species might have been more vulnerable to climate shifts, while others were more susceptible to human hunting. The debate continues, but the role of human hunters as a significant force in shaping the biological landscape at the end of the Ice Age is widely acknowledged, marking one of the earliest instances of human activity having a profound and lasting impact on global biodiversity. The retreat of the massive ice sheets at the end of the Ice Age, starting around 19,000 years ago, and largely concluding by 10,000 years ago, fundamentally transformed the Earth's land surface. As the ice disappeared, it revealed entirely new landscapes, and existing ones were dramatically altered. This process of deglaciation led to the emergence of new forests, grasslands, and extensive wet areas, creating the diverse environments that characterize much of the modern world. One of the most significant changes was the expansion of forests. During the last glacial maximum, vast areas of the Northern Hemisphere, particularly in Europe and North America, were dominated by treeless tundra and cold grasslands, the Mammoth steppe. Forests were largely confined to isolated refugia in southern Europe and parts of North America, or to specific sheltered valleys. As temperatures rose and moisture became more available, pioneer tree species such as birch and pine began to colonize the newly exposed land. Over thousands of years, these early forests were gradually replaced by more diverse temperate and boreal forests, including deciduous trees like oak, elm, and maple, as well as spruce and fir. This northward and upward expansion of forests fundamentally changed the appearance of continents, replacing open, cold environments with dense woodlands. The growth of these new forests also had ecological consequences, altering habitats for animals and influencing atmospheric composition. Alongside forests, new grasslands also emerged, distinct from the Ice Age Mammoth steppe. As the climate warmed, some areas that were previously covered by ice or permafrost developed into temperate grasslands. These grasslands, often richer in plant diversity than their glacial predecessors, supported new communities of grazing animals. In North America, for instance, the Great Plains, while influenced by earlier glacial processes, developed into the extensive grasslands that supported vast herds of bison. The specific composition of these new grasslands varied depending on soil type, precipitation, and temperature, but they represented a significant shift from the cold, dry steppes of the glacial period. Perhaps the most striking feature of the new landscapes was the proliferation of wet areas, including lakes, rivers, and wetlands. As the immense ice sheets melted, they released staggering volumes of water. This meltwater accumulated in depressions carved out by the glaciers, forming countless new lakes. These could range from small kettle lakes, formed by melting blocks of ice buried in sediment, to enormous proglacial lakes, like Glacial Lake Agassiz in North America, which was larger than all of the modern Great Lakes combined. These lakes were often temporary, eventually draining or shrinking as the climate continued to warm and new drainage patterns were established. But many persisted to become the lakes we see today. The Scandinavian countries, Canada, and parts of the northern United States are dotted with tens of thousands of lakes, a direct legacy of glacial melting. The melting ice also led to the formation of extensive wetlands, bogs, and fens. In low-lying areas with poor drainage, meltwater saturated the ground, creating conditions favourable for water-loving vegetation. These wetlands became important ecosystems, supporting diverse plant and animal life and playing a role in carbon cycling. The presence of permafrost in formerly glaciated regions, which slowly thawed over millennia, also contributed to the formation of wetlands, as the impermeable frozen layer beneath the surface trapped water. The land itself underwent significant physical changes. The removal of the immense weight of the ice sheets caused the Earth's crust to slowly rebound, a process known as isostatic uplift, which continues today in formerly glaciated regions. This uplift changed local topography, affecting drainage and creating new coastal features. The vast amounts of sediment transported and deposited by the glaciers and meltwater streams created new soil types. Glacial till, a mixture of clay, sand, and boulders, formed the basis for many fertile agricultural lands. Outwash plains, composed of sand and gravel deposited by meltwater, also became widespread. The overall effect was a mosaic of new environments. The transition from a world dominated by ice and cold steppe to one of forests, temperate grasslands, and abundant freshwater bodies created new ecological niches and opportunities for life. This environmental restructuring directly influenced the distribution and evolution of plant and animal species, and it profoundly impacted human populations. As the landscapes changed, so did human subsistence strategies, leading to a shift from specialized megafauna hunting to a broader spectrum economy, exploiting diverse plant and animal resources available in these newly formed environments. The new landscapes of the post-Ice Age world were the foundation upon which modern ecosystems and human civilizations would eventually develop. The melting of the vast ice sheets at the end of the Ice Age brought about a dramatic and fundamental transformation of river systems across the globe, particularly in formerly glaciated regions. The sheer volume of meltwater, combined with the erosive and depositional power of the glaciers themselves, created new river paths, reshaped valleys, and established the hydrological networks that largely exist today. This was a period of immense fluvial dynamism. Before the Ice Age, river systems had established courses based on pre-glacial topography. However, the advance of continental ice sheets disrupted these patterns. Glaciers acted as massive barriers, blocking existing river valleys, diverting flows, and sometimes completely burying drainage networks. For example, in North America, the southward advance of the Laurentide ice sheet blocked northward flowing rivers, forcing them to find new outlets, often along the ice margin. This led to the formation of large proglacial lakes, which then overflowed, carving new channels. As the ice sheets began to melt, immense quantities of meltwater were released. This meltwater flowed away from the ice fronts, forming powerful, braided rivers heavily laden with sediment. These meltwater channels were often much larger and more energetic than modern rivers in the same areas. They carried vast amounts of sand, gravel, and boulders, which were deposited as outwash plains downstream from the retreating ice. The sheer volume and velocity of these meltwater flows had immense erosive power. They scoured bedrock, deepening existing valleys or carving entirely new ones. For instance, the dramatic gorges and valleys of many formerly glaciated regions are direct results of this meltwater erosion. One of the most striking examples of river change is the formation of new drainage divides and the capture of river systems. When ice sheets retreated, new low points or pathways for water flow became available. Rivers that had been diverted by ice might find new, more direct routes, abandoning their old channels. This process, known as stream capture, could lead to dramatic changes in the size and flow of river basins. For example, The modern course of the Ohio River in North America was significantly influenced by glacial meltwater, as it became a major drainage pathway for water from the retreating Laurentide ice sheet. Similarly, the Missouri River's course was altered by glacial action. The Great Lakes system in North America is a prime example of how melting ice created and shaped major hydrological features. The basins of the Great Lakes were carved out by the erosive power of the Laurentide ice sheet. As the ice retreated, these basins filled with meltwater, forming a series of proglacial lakes that eventually evolved into the modern Great Lakes. The outlets and connections between these lakes changed repeatedly as the ice retreated and the land rebounded, leading to various temporary lake stages and massive outflow events. In Europe, the melting of the Scandinavian ice sheet also led to significant changes in river systems. The Baltic Sea, for instance, evolved through several stages, including a freshwater lake, the Baltic Ice Lake, that drained catastrophically at times, and later a brackish sea as connections to the ocean were established. Rivers flowing into the Baltic region were profoundly affected by these changes in base level and by the presence of ice. The legacy of these Ice Age river changes is still evident in the landscape. Many modern rivers flow in valleys that were either created or significantly modified by glacial meltwater. The presence of terraces along riverbanks, composed of glacial outwash, indicates former higher levels of meltwater flow. The distribution of sediments such as sand and gravel deposits along river courses also tells a story of intense fluvial activity during deglaciation. These changes in river systems were not merely geological curiosities, they had profound implications for ecosystems and human populations. New rivers provided fresh water sources, new fishing opportunities, and pathways for migration. However, they also presented challenges, with powerful floods and shifting channels requiring human adaptation. The transformation of river systems at the end of the Ice Age was a dynamic and powerful testament to the Earth's ability to reshape itself in response to major climatic shifts. The retreat of the massive ice sheets at the end of the Ice Age fundamentally reshaped the Earth's hydrology, leading to the widespread formation of new freshwater bodies, most notably vast lakes. These lakes varied greatly in size, permanence, and origin, but all were direct consequences of the immense volumes of meltwater released from the decaying glaciers. The creation of these lakes transformed landscapes, influenced climate, and provided new ecological niches. One of the most significant types of lakes formed during deglaciation were proglacial lakes. These were immense bodies of water that accumulated at the margins of retreating ice sheets, often dammed by the ice itself or by glacial moraines, ridges of sediment deposited by the glacier. A prime example is Glacial Lake Agassiz in North America. This colossal lake formed in the central lowlands of North America as the Laurentide ice sheet melted and retreated northward. At its greatest extent, Lake Agassiz was larger than all of the modern Great Lakes combined, covering parts of present-day Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, North Dakota, and Minnesota. It held an estimated 4,500 cubic miles of water. The lake drained periodically through various outlets, sometimes catastrophically, releasing massive floods of fresh water that significantly impacted global ocean circulation. Another notable proglacial lake was Glacial Lake Missoula, formed by the flathead lobe of the Cordilleran ice sheet in western Montana. This lake was repeatedly dammed by ice, filled, and then catastrophically drained in a series of floods that scoured the channeled scablands of eastern Washington. These events, occurring over thousands of years, created a unique landscape of dry waterfalls and deep canyons. The formation and drainage of such large lakes played a critical role in the distribution of water and sediment across continents. Beyond these colossal examples, numerous other large proglacial lakes formed across glaciated regions. In Europe, the Baltic Ice Lake formed in the basin of the present-day Baltic Sea as the Scandinavian ice sheet retreated. This lake underwent several stages, sometimes connected to the ocean, and sometimes dammed by ice or land uplift, before eventually evolving into the brackish Baltic Sea we know today. These proglacial lakes were crucial features of the deglaciated landscape, acting as temporary reservoirs for meltwater and influencing regional climate by moderating temperatures. Another common type of glacial lake is the kettle lake. These relatively smaller, often circular lakes are formed when blocks of stagnant ice, detached from a retreating glacier, become buried in glacial sediments, till or outwash. As these buried ice blocks slowly melt, they leave behind depressions in the landscape, which then fill with water to form lakes. Kettle lakes are abundant in formerly glaciated regions like Wisconsin and Minnesota in the United States, and in parts of Canada and northern Europe. Their numerous presence indicates the widespread and irregular melting of ice. Finger lakes are another distinctive glacial lake type, particularly prominent in regions like upstate New York. These long, narrow and deep lakes are typically formed in pre-existing river valleys that were deepened and straightened by the erosive power of advancing glaciers. As the ice retreated, these over-deepened valleys filled with meltwater, creating the characteristic elongated lake shapes. Similarly, cirque lakes, also known as tarns, are small, often circular lakes found in cirques, which are amphitheatre-like basins carved by glaciers in mountainous regions. As the glaciers melt, the basin fills with water. The sheer number of lakes formed at the end of the Ice Age had profound ecological and environmental impacts. They provided vast new freshwater habitats for aquatic life, leading to the diversification of fish, amphibians, and invertebrates. They also became crucial stopover points for migratory birds. For human populations, these new lakes offered abundant resources, including fish, waterfowl, and access to fresh water, influencing settlement patterns and subsistence strategies. The sediments deposited in these lakes provide invaluable archives of past climate and environmental changes, preserving pollen, diatoms, and other indicators of historical conditions. The process of lake formation was intertwined with the ongoing changes in the Earth's crust due to isostatic rebound. As the weight of the ice was removed, the land slowly began to rise. This uplift sometimes caused lakes to tilt, drain in new directions, or even disappear entirely. In other cases, differential uplift could create new depressions that filled with water. The formation of these lakes was thus a dynamic process, influenced by both the immediate melting of ice and the longer-term geological response of the Earth's crust. The legacy of Ice Age glaciation is visible today in the countless lakes that dot the Northern Hemisphere, serving as a constant reminder of the dramatic transformation that occurred as the planet emerged from its last deep chill. The end of the Ice Age brought about profound environmental changes that necessitated equally significant adaptations in human ways of life. As the vast ice sheets melted and landscapes transformed, the focus of human survival shifted from primarily hunting large, cold-adapted animals to a broader spectrum of food sources. This period of adaptation, often termed the Mesolithic in Europe or the Archaic period in the Americas, saw humans developing new tools, technologies, and social structures to thrive in the changing world. One of the most critical adaptations was the shift from specialized megafauna hunting to a broader subsistence strategy. During the peak of the Ice Age, in many regions, human cultures, like the Clovis people in North America or the Upper Paleolithic hunters in Eurasia, relied heavily on large game such as mammoths, mastodons, woolly rhinos, and giant bison. These animals provided vast amounts of meat, fat, hides for clothing and shelter, and bones for tools. However, as the Ice Age ended, many of these megafauna species went extinct. This forced humans to diversify their diet and hunting techniques. Humans began to exploit a wider variety of animals. This included smaller mammals like deer, elk, wild boar, and various types of rodents and birds. Hunting strategies adapted to these smaller, faster animals. Instead of relying solely on heavy spears for large game, hunters increasingly used lighter, more agile spears, atlatls, spear throwers, and eventually the bow and arrow, which allowed for more precise and distant kills of nimble prey. The shift also involved trapping and snaring smaller game, techniques that are less effective for megafauna but highly efficient for medium-sized animals. A significant part of the broader subsistence strategy was the increased reliance on aquatic resources. As glaciers melted, countless new lakes, rivers, and coastal environments were created or expanded. Humans rapidly adapted to exploit these new freshwater and marine habitats. Fishing became a major food source, leading to the development of specialized tools like fishhooks, nets, and harpoons. Shellfish collection became prevalent in coastal areas, with archaeological sites showing large middens, mounds of discarded shells, indicating intensive exploitation. The availability of reliable aquatic resources often led to more sedentary lifestyles, as groups could remain in one location for longer periods without depleting local food sources. This contrasted with the highly mobile lifestyles often associated with megafauna hunters who followed migrating herds. Plant gathering also became a much more significant component of the human diet. As forests expanded and new plant communities flourished in the warmer, wetter conditions, humans gained access to a wider array of edible plants, including roots, tubers, berries, nuts, and seeds. This required developing new knowledge about plant seasons, locations, and processing techniques. Tools for gathering and processing plants, such as grinding stones for seeds or baskets for collection, became more common. The shift towards plant-rich diets reduced reliance on meat and provided a more stable and diverse food supply. These changes in subsistence were accompanied by adaptations in social organization and settlement patterns. While highly mobile bands were common during the Ice Age, the increased availability of localized and diverse resources led to the emergence of more semi-permanent or seasonal base camps. Groups might congregate in larger numbers during times of abundant resources, such as salmon runs or nut harvests, and then disperse into smaller family units during leaner seasons. The development of a larger, more complex base camps, sometimes with evidence of more substantial structures, reflects this increased sedentism. This also facilitated the development of more complex social structures, increased population densities in favoured areas, and potentially more elaborate trade networks for raw materials and finished goods. The need to adapt to new environments also spurred technological innovation. Beyond hunting and fishing tools, humans developed a range of implements for processing plant foods, preparing hides for new types of clothing suitable for warmer climates, and constructing more varied shelters. This era saw the refinement of microlithic technology, where tiny, geometrically shaped stone inserts were used to create composite tools like barbed spears, arrows, and sickles. These small, versatile tools were efficient and economical in terms of raw material. The end of the Ice Age and the subsequent transformation of landscapes and animal populations spurred a significant period of innovation in human tool technology. As humans adapted to new environments and shifted their subsistence strategies from relying heavily on megafauna to exploiting a wider variety of resources, their toolkits became more varied, specialized, and efficient. This era, often termed the Mesolithic in the Old World and the Archaic in the Americas, witnessed a diversification of materials and techniques beyond the core Stone Age repertoire. One of the most notable developments was the widespread adoption and refinement of microlithic technology. Microliths are small, geometrically shaped stone inserts, typically less than an inch long, such as triangles, crescents, or trapezoids. These tiny flakes were not used individually but were hafted, attached, into slots or grooves in bone, antler, or wooden shafts to create composite tools. This allowed for the construction of very sharp, barbed points for spears and arrows, as well as cutting edges for knives and sickles. The advantage of microliths was their efficiency in raw material use. Many sharp inserts could be produced from a single stone core, and their versatility. If a single microlith broke, it could be easily replaced without discarding the entire tool. This technology reflected a move towards more specialized and curated toolkits. The increasing importance of fishing led to the development of a range of new tools specifically designed for aquatic resource exploitation. Fish hooks, crafted from bone, antler, or shell, became common. Their design allowed for efficient capture of fish. Harpoons, made from bone or antler, often with barbed points, were used for spearing large fish and marine mammals. The presence of these tools in archaeological sites indicates a significant reliance on aquatic protein sources. Fishing nets, though rarely preserved, are inferred from the presence of net sinkers, perforated stones used to weigh down nets, and bone or antler needles suitable for making and mending nets. The ability to fish effectively allowed human groups to exploit abundant seasonal resources, sometimes leading to more sedentary settlements along rivers or coasts. For gathering plants and processing plant foods, new tools also emerged. As forests and diverse plant communities expanded, humans harvested a wider variety of seeds, nuts, and roots. Grinding stones, including handstones and grinding slabs, or metates, became common, used for processing wild grains, nuts, and other tough plant materials into flour or paste. These tools indicate a shift towards a diet that incorporated more plant carbohydrates. Digging sticks, often with weighted stones, would have been used for excavating roots and tubers, though archaeological evidence for these wooden tools is rare due to preservation issues. Baskets and woven containers, also poorly preserved, are inferred from patterns of wear on other tools and by the necessity of transporting collected plant foods. The changing climate also influenced the types of hunting tools. As many megafauna went extinct and forests expanded, hunting focus shifted to smaller, faster-moving animals like deer, elk, and wild boar. The bow and arrow became increasingly widespread during this period. The bow and arrow offered advantages over spears in terms of range, accuracy, and ease of use in wooded environments, allowing hunters to target smaller prey more effectively. The development of specialized arrowheads, often microlithic, reflects this adaptation. Tools for processing hides and making clothing continued to evolve. As humans moved into diverse climates, the need for effective clothing remained paramount. Bone and ivory needles became finer, allowing for tailored garments that offered better insulation or ventilation as needed. Scrapers continued to be essential for preparing hides. Awls, pointed tools made from bone or stone, were used for piercing holes in leather for sewing. Beyond utilitarian tools, the period also saw a continued development of symbolic and artistic tools. Engraving tools, burins, were used to create intricate designs on bone, antler, and stone, for both portable art and potentially for marking or record keeping. The presence of personal ornaments such as beads and pendants made from various materials suggest tools for drilling, polishing, and shaping these decorative items. The overall trend in tool technology at the end of the Ice Age was towards greater efficiency, versatility, and specialization. Tools were often designed for specific tasks and raw materials were used more economically. This technological innovation was a direct response to the changing environment and the diversification of available resources. It allowed human populations to adapt to the profound ecological shifts occurring around them, enabling them to thrive in a world without the giant Ice Age animals and laying crucial groundwork for the subsequent development of agriculture and more sedentary lifestyles. The ingenuity displayed in these new tools is a testament to the adaptability and problem-solving capabilities of early human societies,